Chapter 1081. In the outer region void, at a place far away from the cloud world, a few people stood solemnly there with different expressions on their faces. Xiuguan was here alone, facing Qing Xian, Tai Huang, as well as the Taisher Demon Lord's clone. However, each of his actions was really calm. On the contrary, Qing Xian's expression was really ugly. To say that his heart and lungs were pierced was not an exaggeration. A full 65,000 Protector Dao soldiers were wiped out in front of his eyes. Such a feeling wasn't good. If one said that the battle in the common people's path vast habitat, the Taoist faction only suffered a small loss. Although Kunming died, he could still revive. If that was the case, then today's battle on the God-falling plains would be a real loss. Qilin King accompanying him. Speaking of which, is this Zong Shou the Saint King alive? When he chose the Xian Grade Golden Flame Qilin Beast as the mount of the Xian Grade Dao soldiers, he predicted that after the 3 ancient emperors, there wouldn't be any more Qilins and there wouldn't be any more Saint Emperors. However, 12,000 years later, the scenes in front of them were like a heavy slap to their faces. It was really strong, such that they were at a loss and didn't know what to do. They still didn't understand. That Zong Shou was so preposterous and killed so many people, so how could he be the saint ruler? Although Tai Huang didn't speak, his eyes were filled with bitterness. Other people didn't recognize it, but the moment those tens of thousands of Xian Flame Golden Qilin beasts lost control, he recognized that it was the aura of the Qilin King. Qilins were auspicious beasts, born from eating good energy in the world. They had unlimited abilities, but it was really tough for them to grow. Only by accompanying the Saint Ruler and absorbing the Saint King energy could they grow into a Qilin King beast. He finally understood. When Rongbi was about to die, he looked at Zong Shou's luck and fortune. He said that this kid was a huge calamity for the Taoist faction, and in the end, he even said the word Qi. So, it wasn't referring to the common people's path battle but today. The last word was most probably referring to that Qilin King, the only thing that the hundreds of thousands of Xian Flame Golden Qilin beasts feared. Reverend Huarua of the Kenzo sect used his divine ability to look at Zong Shou's fate a month ago. However, in just an instant, his spiritual eye was destroyed. Blood flowed from his 7 orifices and he lost close to half of his lifespan. Xiuguan isn't proficient in algebra, but since Zong Shou can get a Qilin to follow him, that's most likely the case. Xiuguan seemed to see through their thoughts. He looked at the inner realm and smiled. Fellow cultivator Qing Xian, are you going to leave? Why don't you wait for a while until the outcome is decided? The 2 people in front of him were already carefully trying to leave this space and withdraw from the battle of wills. Qing Xian's face was even more livid. He stared at Xiuguan with unfathomable eyes. As the saint ruler of the world, Song Xingdao and the Kenzo sect probably knew that Zong Shou had a Qilin by his side. However, they kept it from him and tried their best to cover up for Zong Shou. The scheme of the 2 sects could be seen from today's events. It was truly sinister. Although he was furious, there was nothing he could do. Since he could plot against Song Xingdao, then naturally, Xiuguan could plot against the Taoist sect too. The Taoist sect suffered heavy losses today. Apart from the huge change when Sibei Taoist Lord left, this was the heaviest loss they had suffered in the past 16,000 years. Even someone as shrewd as him found it hard to remain calm. The pain and rage in his heart were just a few threads that scattered into the void. It caused many spiritual explosions in the surrounding space. However, at this moment, he could only suppress the anger in his chest. Fellow cultivator Xiuguan must be joking. The outcome of today has been decided, so what can we do if we don't leave? Do we stay here and see if fellow cultivator Xiuguan is happy? Along with the right wing of the Shang ruler collapsing, the outcome of the battle was obvious. Zhongshuan's yin-yang heart needle technique was worth looking forward to. However, since Zong Shou had the body of a Saint King, then naturally, he was invulnerable to all evil. The forbidden technique was terrifying, but in the cloud world, when did the founding emperors of the dynasties fear it? Even some generals with heavy vengeful energy didn't care. Much less Zhongshu, who was the saint ruler of the world. The Zhongshuan technique was just a joke. I really do have such intentions. I am really happy and want to find someone to share it with. Xiuguan was delighted and laughed out loud. It wasn't because he was delighted, but because thousands of years of anger and hatred were suppressed. Today, he was finally able to vent it all out. If the two of you want to leave, then go ahead. Xiuguan won't stop you, but that is a little unkind. Just as he spoke, Wushang Yuan demon Li Bieshue's body appeared. His expression wasn't good and his eyes were dark and cold. Qing Xian cultivator, since our three factions are working together, then naturally, we should advance and retreat together. There was another meaning in his words, but everyone present knew that he was here for the tens of thousands of Heaven Demon War Cavalry and the Yuanshi Demon Sects Yuanshi Demon Spirit Cavalry. Although the Taoist faction's Xian Grey Dao soldiers were all wiped out. However, the tens of thousands of Demon Path Demon Cavalry were still perfectly fine. However, once Qing Xian and Tai Huang left with the Taoist faction, then these tens of thousands of Demon Path Dao soldiers wouldn't be able to survive. Only now did they know how vicious Kong Yao's plan was. There was only one path nearby that could safely leave the God-falling plains. As for the 600,000 troops of the Cloud World, less than 1% of them would be able to leave safely. Qing Xian didn't speak, but his eyes were filled with a cold intent. Advance and retreat together? Did they have to wait for the Heaven Demon War Cavalry to escape from the Gan army? If they delayed, the hundreds of Taoist faction true martial swordsmen wouldn't be able to escape. There was no reason to sacrifice the last bit of Taoist faction resources for the lives of the Demon Path people. Since the Purple Qilin Flame Spear Cavalry was wiped out, then the Heaven Demon War Cavalry would also die on the battlefield. That was something that they would love to see. If not, how would they control them in the future? If the Demon Path tossed aside their grievances with Song Xingdao and attacked the mid-plains, how would they block them? However, after all, there was an alliance agreement and he couldn't voice out such thoughts. Li Bieshue, our three factions have an alliance agreement? Why haven't I heard of it before? To lose the big for the small, isn't that hurting those close to you and making the enemy happy? The one who spoke wasn't Yuanshi and Tai Huang, but Zhuxi who was crossing the air. Qing Xian looked over, but he couldn't help but feel pity for him. Although the Taoist faction suffered heavy losses this time, after all, their foundations were still there. However, although the Confucian faction didn't seem to suffer heavy losses, it was actually much worse than the Taoist faction. The entire Confucian faction saw them as violent, and they even told the world that they were the enemy of the Confucian faction, someone that everyone could kill. However, he was a saint ruler who was on the same level as the three ancient emperors that the Confucian faction worshipped. Naturally, it was a huge blow to the Confucian faction. If it was more serious, it could even be seen as the Cloud World and the heavens rejecting the Confucian faction and not recognizing their path. To Zhu Zi, it wasn't too much to say that he had lost all his prestige. Looking out, he saw that Zhu Zi's expression was a little dazed. He was suddenly lost, suddenly furious, suddenly confused, like he was showing signs of turning into a demon. However, there was still some clarity in his eyes as he bowed towards Qing Xian. I will leave the matters of the world to brother Qing Xian. Qing Xian's face turned solemn as he nodded his head. This matter concerns the survival of our Taoist faction, so Qing Xian will naturally try his best. However, Zhu Zi, have you made your decision? Zhu Zi's face was numb as he nodded his head slightly. What else could he do? After knowing that Zhongshu was the saint ruler, he was going to give up and crawl under that kid's feet? This was absolutely impossible. The heavens must have made a mistake. That ruler had ascended to the throne for 10 years, but the number of times he dealt with politics could be counted on one hand. He treated the officials badly and did all sorts of preposterous things. He even said in front of everyone that he wanted to destroy the Confucian faction. How could such a person be the Saint King? The Confucian faction had been passed down for more than 10,000 years and had created several generations of prosperous eras. It was the orthodox way of ruling a country. What right did Zhong Shou have to be recognized by the heavenly Tao? He, Zhu, was knowledgeable and looked at the principles of the world. There was no way he was wrong. Even if Zhong Shou was really the saint ruler, then the heavens were the ones in the wrong. Not him, Zhu. The billions of students in the Confucian faction had long been irreconcilable with Zhong Shou. Song Shengdao's fallacies and Shi Zi's theory that everyone was equal were simply a disaster. How could they be right? This world needed respect and etiquette, and there was a hierarchy in order for it to function properly and for there to be a great era of governance. What was the point of being like China? However, the most important thing now was to save Yin. Only when this ruler of Taishang was still there and the Taishang country was still stable could they have the ability to go up against Zhong Shou and Song Shengdao. The two of them spoke, totally ignoring Wushang Yuan Demon. The latter was furious and wanted to speak. In the end, he kept silent. He didn't say anything, only his lips curled up and he laughed coldly. Taisher kept silent and looked into the world with a dark gaze. Who knew what he was thinking about? Xiuguan was at the side and looked at the scenes like an outsider. However, he found it really interesting and he was really interested. At this moment, several world rivers away, at a place close to God-falling plains, Qingming was stunned as she looked into the cloud world. She felt that her body and mind were all turning cold. This was a jade altar that stretched out in the void outside of the world. There were thousands of Taoist faction disciples on it. It was one of the nodes of the endless sky, forbidden magic formation. It provided a steady stream of Tao energy and spiritual energy for this formation that sealed off the void. It locked down hundreds of miles of land and also suppressed Zhong Shou's world-burning flame. Naturally, it couldn't be maintained by just 19 people who had to split their attention to deal with Song Shengdao and the Kenzo sect. However, at this moment, panic was spreading through the crowd. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. The purple Qilin Flame's spear cavalry was actually wiped out? How is that possible? Could it be that our three sects are going to be defeated here? A full 65,000 Xian grade Dao soldiers are gone just like that? What should we do? Maintain the formation now? Is there any use? Who knows if this battle will affect this place? The Dao soldiers are defeated and the Blood Cloud cavalry is unrestrained. If we don't leave now, there will be many casualties. The Blood Cloud cavalry is really fierce and has a famous general leading them. Even 5 to 6 Saint Realm cultivators can't beat them. Everyone panicked, but Qingming didn't bother. Her heart felt like it was struck by lightning and she was stunned. The king of Qilin accompanied him. That person was actually the Saint King. Chapter 1082. At the same time, within Gantian Mountain City. On the altar hanging alone on the high cliff, Kong Rui's brows rose up as he looked at a jade stone that was on the verge of breaking. More accurately, it was a formation plate made of jade. It was a secret technique from the Kong family that corresponded to another artifact. As long as the formation plate was in his hands and the corresponding artifact was still complete, then no one would be able to harm the person he was protecting. What a strong evil technique, Yin-Yang Heart Needle Curse. Is it Zhongshuan? Kong Rui muttered to himself. A complicated expression flashed across his eyes. The Yin-Yang Heart Needle incantation was an ancient technique that only the Grand Shang Grand Tutor knew. Kong Rui had never personally seen it, but he had heard the elders in the family talk about it. 100 years ago, before Emperor Yuanchen took over, Zhongshuan had used this technique to kill someone. Only then did Yin succeed in taking the throne. At that time, even if the entire Kong family worked together, They couldn't block this technique. His great-uncle, who was once the imperial astronomer, spat out blood and died 3 years later. The reason was that his injuries were too heavy in that battle, and he was unable to suppress it. With Yin taking over, the animosity between the Kong family and Zhongshuan naturally ended. Instead, they had to respect him and try to get on his good side. However, because of Kong Yao, his relationship with Zhongshuan was really bad. At this moment, Kong Rui couldn't help but feel emotional. This person was able to become the Taishan Grand Teacher and spread his name across the world because of this yin-yang heart needle curse. Today's defeat was also because of this technique. You used the Taishan country power to cultivate and entered the Saint realm. However, since you knew that the Taishan country fate was declining, you didn't stop and instead fell deeper into it. Why did you do that? That jade stone formation plate was about to break and couldn't be salvaged. Kong Rui sighed and didn't bother anymore. The two of them fought in the air, and he had already lost. He was actually unable to block for a moment. Although they were 10,000 miles apart and Zhongshuan had borrowed the vital energy essence of 3,000 kids. However, the gap between the two couldn't be calculated logically. Luckily, it was okay. This technique couldn't do anything to his lord. Kong Rui turned to look at the sky, only to see a few bright stars shining in the sky. The stars in the sky were the manifestation of the laws and great Daos of this domain. Therefore, the starry skies of the various worlds were largely the same. However, there were some slight differences, reflecting the changes of the various realms. And these people who cultivated algebra relied on the changes of these celestial bodies to observe the changes in the general situation of a world. It was unknown who owned a few of them, but they were still in culmination. Since he didn't know anything about the light or the dark, he must be the rumored candidate for the Divine Emperor. A star near the east, surrounded by purple energy, was Zhong Shou's life star. It had only appeared in the starry sky today. He looked exceptionally pure and holy, completely different from the other godly emperor candidate. The second star belonged to Kong Yao, who was also at the army-shattering light-shaking realm. At this moment, starlight was also shining towards the east. If that's the case, then the outcome has already been decided? The arrival of a saint was like a sword unsheathed. His techniques were unable to hide Zhong Shou anymore, and he also didn't need to purposely hide anything. The Deqian country strength was already formed, and their wings were fully grown. No one could wipe it out, and no one could suppress the light of the Saint King. Shaking his head, Kong Rui got up and walked out of the altar. However, at this moment, a weird glow flashed in his eyes. The dragon energy is flowing towards the west, and the Avicii throne can't suppress it. Why is that? A few years ago, Kong Rui still needed the One King divination money to observe the changes in the earth energy. At this moment, he didn't need any special techniques to be able to see everything. He stood on the spot in deep thought, and just like that, he gained something. In just a moment, he gained something. He gave out a self-mocking laugh. The changes just now made his heart jump. So that is the case, it is time to move the capital. Gantian Mountain was prosperous, and could be compared to the imperial capital, but it was located in a corner and was a little small. In the future, it would be good to use it as a companion city. To be able to move the capital to the central continent, the results of this battle would be much better than he had imagined. Looking down from the mountain peak, he looked at the luxurious Kong family residence that was built less than 3 years ago. Kong Rui's face was filled with a bitter smile. It seemed like not long later it was time to move. However, this time it was the central continent. How nostalgic! What are you afraid of? Although Kong Yao didn't know what technique it was, anyone with a tough fate would find it hard to be carved by it. For example, that Xiang King and Ranwu King, they have a strong vengeful aura that demons and evil cannot invade. Husband is about the same. God Falling Plains battlefield. When Zhong Shou heard Kong Yao's words, he heaved a sigh of relief. Speaking of which, Yuan Jing and Kong Rui did indeed say that he had the Saint King energy protecting his body, and that no evil could invade his body. As for the Qilin auspicious beast in legends, it was able to chase away all evil. At this moment, apart from his body feeling cold and his chest hurting, he didn't feel anything else. Putting down his worries, Zhong Shou looked into the distance once more. His spiritual sense spread out and locked onto Blood Saint Demon Lord, Yuntai and Shuejiu. If it was as expected, the three of them should be thinking about how to escape today. Moments later, Zhong Shou laughed coldly. As expected. However, the three of them were already here, so how could they leave just because they wanted to? He actually stood up, his body flashing as he walked out of the carriage. There wasn't much time left and the battle was coming to an end. Then it was time for him to act. In front of Yin Yu's carriage, Yuntai felt a chill down his spine. He could already feel that bone-piercing killing intent. Looking into the distance, coincidentally, Zhong Shou's true body had disappeared from the jade carriage. Only an illusion was left on the throne. He could only sense that this person was holding a sword as he sped through the air and walked over. His speed didn't seem fast or slow, but in just a 30th of a breath, he crossed dozens of miles. One of the divine consciousnesses had locked onto his cloud platform. He had to work together with Shuejiu to block, using their spiritual sense to block and lock down to prevent this person from getting close. Unfortunately, the people on the carriage didn't notice anything. They were still surprised by the arrival of the 3 sets of Great Beidou true martial sword formations. Just one set of sword formations can temporarily restrict the Blood Cloud cavalry. At that time, our left wing will be able to crush them in a few moments. It doesn't need so long. There is still 100 breaths before Grand Teacher Zhongshuan's Yin-Yang Heart Needle can be activated. Oh? Are those people De Qian's Heaven-Grade Dao soldiers? Heaven-Grade Dao soldiers? Just a barbaric country. What kind of Heaven-Grade Dao soldiers can compare to the Taoist faction's true martial swordsmen? Only 72, half of the true martial swordsmen. Even if their combat strength is similar, there is no need to worry. The officials were in deep discussion. Even Yin Yu's expression turned for the better. Shuejiu bowed. The situation is dangerous. With the Taoist faction's great true martial sword formation covering, Your Majesty please leave this place. Yuntai nodded. Our Taishang has already lost this battle. We don't have much time and it will be too late. Your Majesty, please follow us to leave this god-falling plains. Yin Yu was startled, his mind was totally blank. 3 great Beidou true martial sword formations entered and the Yin-Yang Heart Needle technique was about to be completed. The battle situation welcomed a turning point and they might even be able to achieve a huge victory. Why did the two of them ask him to leave at the same time? Did they not have high hopes for this battle? At this moment, Yin Yu forced himself to calm down, trying his best not to let his voice tremble. Yuntai Celestial Venerable, Saint Master Lu, can the two of you tell me why? Your Majesty will know the reason in the future. Yuntai sighed. These 100 great true martial swordsmen entered the battlefield just to cover him and Yin Yu and not to try to turn the situation around. If he said the truth now, who knows whether or not this Taishang Yuanshan Emperor would lose his mind from the shock. Shuejiu's face wouldn't look good either. Yin Yu didn't understand and wanted to ask more. However, he heard a loud explosion not far away and exclamations rose up all around. Looking out, only to see that it was the left wing that he had high hopes for. Those 40,000 Heaven Demon War Cavalry and 10,000 Yuanshi Demon Spirit Cavalry all turned around, swiftly galloping backward like they were fleeing for their lives. They tossed the 100,000 Taishang Cavalry to the side. They allowed the common people's mysterious dragon warriors and Kenzo sect Moyang sword cavalry to charge over to crush them. The cavalry on the left and right collapsed right away, unable to block the Taishang cavalry for even a moment. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and confusion. They didn't understand why the demon sect people wanted to flee. Did they collude with the Deqian? They purposely acted out such a show to cause the Taishang to lose and all their elites to die here? However, in terms of hatred, the demon sect was above the Taoist faction and Confucian faction. Xingxia was suppressed and sealed, and had no chance of reviving. It was said that Taisher Demon Lord was injured because of Zhongsho. Recently, the demon sect people went all out, crazily massacring Deqian people and even assassinating officials. Logically speaking, the hatred between the two sides should be unresolvable. However, it was tough to say. The thoughts of the demon sect people were tough for normal people to predict. So, our Taishang has lost? As expected, these demon path people are unreliable. Damn it, my Li family took out 20,000 great swordsmen Xuanyu. Retreat. If not, we will all die here. Can we retreat? Those Moyong sword cavalry are already blocking the back path of the middle army. We are dead this time. We are dead. Is that yin-yang heart needle technique not done yet? Zhong Yuan's 30,000 blood cavalry had already broken in from the waist of the Taishang middle army. They were still invincible. The Kenzo sect's Moyong sword cavalry went diagonally behind, cutting off the retreat path of the hundreds of thousands of infantry. The 50,000 common people's Xian dragon warriors followed closely behind the tens of thousands of demon cavalry. They chased and killed. The defeat of the two wings also affected the middle army. At this moment it was like a mountain collapsing. On the side of the Taishang, it was like the sky was about to collapse. The opposite Deqian army was pumped up. Everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. They actually won today just like that? How difficult. They originally thought that it would be a tough battle, but they won so easily without even using any strength. Yuntai took it all in and sighed. When he spoke once more, he didn't allow Yin to reject. Your Majesty, please allow me to be rude. Chapter 1083. Yuntai took it all in and sighed. When he spoke once more, he didn't allow Yin to reject. Your Majesty, please allow me to be rude. A cloud light swept, and before Yin could react, his body was swept up from the throne. Everyone here could die, but only Yin couldn't die here. The moment his body flew into the air, he saw two streaks of sword light slashing towards him. Slaying. It was the two Source Ocean Big Dipper demons slaying sword formations above the Jiochi Palace. Each streak of light had the strength of a Saint Realm expert. The sword energy was extremely cold. Yuntai's pupils constricted. At this moment, dozens of sword energies shot out from the three great Beidou true martial sword formations, intersecting with one another. The two streaks of sword energy were broken down halfway. Then, three thick and huge true martial giant swords formed in mid-air and slashed down towards the Jiochi Palace. However, at this moment, Yuntai didn't care about the outcome of the battle between these two top Dao soldiers. He only focused on explaining to Yin, who was wrapped up in cloud energy, these Source Ocean Demon slaying warriors are the strongest Dao soldiers under Zhongsho. When he was exploring the outer region, he fought against the heaven-grade Dao soldiers of Judu Xianting. 1 against 3 and he was able to win. Who knows where this Zhongsho found such a Dao soldier cultivation technique? Their combat strength is similar to our Taoist faction true martial swordsmen, and they are even sharper. When Yin heard this, he stopped struggling. He could use King Path martial arts and his combat strength wasn't below Saint Realm. If he didn't want to leave, even Yuntai and Xue Zhai wouldn't be able to force him. At this point, only the strength of the Taoist faction and demon faction Dao soldiers could be relied on. However, if these 72 so-called Source Ocean Demon slaying warriors had the ability to restrict the great Beidou true martial sword formation, then this battle would be unsalvageable. However, he still had some doubts in his heart. Even if he couldn't win, there was still Zhongshuan and the yin-yang heart needle curse. 70 minutes had passed and only 20 breaths were left. That Zhong Shou has an invulnerable body. Curses are hard to hurt. Zhong Xian's yin-yang heart needle technique might be useful against normal monarchs, but it couldn't do anything to him. You're just asking for your own humiliation and seeking death. Yin Yu was stunned again. He remembered that not long ago, when Zhongshuan used this spell, Taoist Master Yun Tai did not say that. Although he did not agree, he did not deny it either. Even if Zhong Shou had a special physique and could not do anything to him, it was needless to say that he was courting death. He looked at Scholar Shuelai, only to see that this Confucian faction disciple's eyes flashed and he didn't dare to look directly at him. He only nodded slightly. Indeed, we can't hurt him. The profound multiplication spell has been activated and cannot be interrupted. We can't save him. Inu couldn't help but frown. Could it be that the two of them knew something? What exactly was it that made the two of them choose to flee without any hesitation? Was this related to the demon sect's tens of thousands of armored cavalry fleeing without fighting? That brat has won a great victory in this battle. At this moment, his aura is at its peak and his king energy is increasing. We can't fight him head-on, we need to avoid him. Just as he said this, he saw a ghost-like sword light unbelievably break open the void and pierce through it. Where the sword tip was pointed at was where Yin Yu's throat was. Yuntai instantly reacted and struck back with his whip. However, he struck the air and hit the air. Looking closely, he noticed that the sword's shadow was all illusionary. Instead, it was another sword light that followed the path of the sword and sped over. But this time, their target was the cloud platform. Slaying. An extremely sharp killing intent caused Yuntai's heart to turn cold. Instantly, he gathered his 5 energies to form a shield in front of him. This kid's sword technique is amazing, please help me. There was no reaction from the side. Yuntai took a peek. Only then did he notice that Scholar Shuelai was hurriedly dodging something, bringing with him a bunch of illusionary images. However, in front of him, there was clearly nothing. Illusionary technique. Only then did Yuntai notice that there was a green mirror hanging high in the distance. Balls of green light shone down towards him. Just looking at it caused illusions to form. Sky Fox End Treasure Illusionary Heart Mirror. Yuntai roared like a tiger and punched out. The 5-colored chi gathered and formed the shape of a dragon on his fist. The moment the energy shield in front of him was pierced, his fist smashed onto the tip of the sword. With a loud ping, a vast and majestic strength smashed in from the tip of the sword. It was obvious that it was compressed to the extreme, causing his flesh and blood to collapse. The power of the slaying sword within it directly attacked his internal organs and destroyed his life force. Yuntai's face twitched. At the last moment before his body collapsed, he tossed out a 3-finger-sized wooden man, following which his body disappeared from the spot and appeared 100 feet away. As for the wooden puppet substitute, it instantly turned into powder and scattered. Looking out at the scenes in the distance, Yuntai's heart was about to bleed. The substitute technique was simple, but the more profound it was, the more it tested one's attainments in the path. It also needed to consume all sorts of treasures that people couldn't imagine. Every item that could be used as a substitute was priceless. It could be used to purchase a perfectly developed minor dimension. Today, he had used these 2 treasures. However, at least he managed to escape death once. The moment such a thought rose up, a sense of danger rose up in his heart. His mind instinctively flashed with the petite body that he had neglected before. Chu Shui, Blood Moon Blade. Heaven Hiding Ability. A blood-colored blade light suddenly exploded out behind him. It was really sudden, as quick as lightning, flashing across in an instant. Even if Yuntai tried his best to dodge, he wasn't able to. His body was sliced in half, his vital energy dissipating. Yuntai's face was filled with pain and anxiousness. He knew that at this moment, he was forced into a corner. You want to leave? That won't be easy. However, I still have some debts that I want to settle with all of you. Zhong-Shou laughed coldly as his body sped through the air. After forcing Yuntai away, when he stabbed out for the second time, his eyes turned to Yin. Out of the 4 Saint Realm experts here, the one he hated the most was the Blood Saint Demon Lord. However, this person had Ao Kuan blocking him and wouldn't be able to leave in a short time. On the contrary, this Yin was more important. He originally thought that this Emperor Yuanqin would only send a general over to sneak attack his Jioqi palace. Who knew that this person would be so confident to personally come over? What a surprise! Today, if he killed this Taishang Emperor, then the Deqian people would be able to unify the Cloud World. To attack a central cloud continent that had no leader and was in a state of disunity, it didn't take much effort for him. This sword wasn't for his own ambition, but for the people of the Cloud World to suffer less from the chaos of war. Even when the spiritual wave rose, he was confident that the people of the Cloud World would be able to pass peacefully. He could suppress the various sects and factions and prevent them from fighting. Actually, even if he unified the Cloud World, Zhong-Shou would be too lazy to bother. He would just use strength to make the various sects and aristocratic families listen to him. He remembered that at the end of the spiritual wave, less than 10% of the people of the Cloud World were left. Even the most prosperous Jiangnan was covered in desolate bones. If this Yin died, then everything would end. Yin's eyes opened wide, like a tiger opening its eyes, showing a fierce glow. Dragon Emperor 9 Royals. He struck out with a palm and instantly a giant mountain and river image appeared behind Yin. Royals. Spirits. Royals. 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 Royals of mountains and rivers. This was the Dragon Emperor 9 Royals. He grabbed out with a palm, instantly gathering King Path power. He actually wanted to grab the sword with his bare hands. Zhong-Shou's expression didn't change, the sword light still pressed forward. As the ruler of the Central Dynasty, how could Yin's strength be underestimated? Top King Path martial arts. Unfortunately, you can't use any of them. Sooner or later, the mountains and rivers will break and the country will belong to others. The sword light broke in, turning into millions of streaks. It suddenly retracted and turned into one sword. Yin's body explosively retreated. His face was dim and a trace of blood appeared on his right hand. As for the Central Plains mountain and river picture behind him, it was showing signs of shattering. Zhong-Shou's expression was cold as he followed closely behind. The third sword was like the horns of an antelope as he struck out once more. This Yuanqin Emperor, although he controlled 52 states, his martial path was really average and wasn't that outstanding. He was out of the country and also suffered a huge defeat. At this moment, he was at his weakest state. If he broke the Dragon Emperor 9 Royals technique, then he could kill him with one sword. Lu Li's eyes were filled with panic and anxiousness. He finally broke free from Zhong-Shou's illusionary technique. With a wave of his sleeves, several tens of scrolls of the moral emblems flew out one after another, turning into a light belt out of thin air, surrounding Yin. He did not choose his words carefully and shouted, "How dare you! You tyrant! You really dare to hurt the ruler of the Mid-Plains? Aren't you afraid of the punishment of the heavens and the backlash of luck?" When Zhong-Shou heard this, he only felt that it was preposterous and he couldn't help but burst out laughing. This time, you all said that you want to help the heavens enforce justice, punish the people for their crimes, to kill me, this tyrannical ruler. Since that is the case, then you won't allow me to fight back? That's right, in your eyes, I, Zhong-Shou, deserve to die. You all want to slice me into pieces. As for this Yuanqin Emperor, it is best if he lives 1,000 years, right? A sword stabbed out, showing no mercy. It was blocked by the light and wasn't able to stab in. However, those dozens of scrolls turned into flames in the air and burned into dust. Zhong Shou continued and was prepared for the fourth sword to end Yin Yu's life. Just as he heard a thunderous roar in his ear. Tyrannical ruler! You dare to hurt my master? Yin Yang Heart Needle, prepare to die. Zhong Shou was stunned and looked below. Then, a large altar came into his view. At the center of the altar was Zhongshuan. In the surroundings there were thousands of children. Curses and restrictions? Zhong Shou instinctively thought back to what Kong Yao said before, that this technique was extremely evil. Then what about these kids? Only then did thoughts of stopping rise up in his heart. The heads of the 3,000 boys and girls all exploded. Then, a huge external power charged into his heart. The red jade necklace that was covered in cracks instantly shattered. Numerous yin and cold energy wrapped around him. Xiari roared out from behind. He charged out from the carriage. His body swelled up by 10 times. A white jade horn and purple Qilin golden armor appeared on his body as he flew to the side of Zhong Shou. He was furious. It was obvious that he was extremely violent. Chapter 1084. Golden flames burned and lit up 1,000 miles of land. At this moment, Xiari was like a small sun hanging in mid-air. Zhong Shou only felt an extremely pure yang power inject over and cover his body. It caused the dark and cold evil energy to instantly reduce by 40%. However, the red jade necklace still shattered. This was why the evil energy stabbed into his heart like a needle. The moment it entered his body, Zhong Shou heard the sound of a dragon and phoenix clashing. It was like the roar of the will of heaven and earth. Then, a pure white pillar of qi soared out from his body. Not only did it cause the yin and evil energy to collapse, but it also spread 770 feet into the clouds. It caused the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to float. Around this pillar of air, there were giant dragons and colorful phoenixes flying around. This is a Qilin? The yin-yang heart needle curse was broken and Zhongshuan suffered a backlash. He spat out a mouthful of black blood. His eyes were filled with fear and disbelief. Saint King energy, dragon and phoenix clashing. You are the Saint Ruler? How is that possible? How is that possible? You are the enemy of the Confucians, the ruler of the Nanman country. You didn't govern for 7 years and acted so preposterously. You didn't follow the rules and didn't care about respect. I don't believe it, he muttered to himself. His skin was turning gray at a visible rate. He said that he didn't believe it, but Zhongshuan knew that Zhong Shou was invulnerable to evil and was protected by the heaven path. If he wasn't the saint ruler, how would things end up like this? Taoist Master Yuntai had lost half of his body, but now he had recovered a little. Chu Shui had the Blood Moonblade and her combat strength was comparable to Saint Realm, but she still wasn't his match. After he calmed down, he started to turn the situation around. Seeing the situation, Yuntai couldn't help but sigh. Qilin beside him, saint energy covering the body, as expected from the saint ruler. Before this, he was informed by Qing Xian through his mind. However, it wasn't as shocking as personally witnessing it. He also noticed that the number of times he sighed bitterly today exceeded the total number of times he had spent in the past 1,000 years. Lu Li's face was dark and sunken like water was about to drip out. He looked towards Zhong Shou, his eyes were dark and sunken. He felt really preposterous. This Taoist master, who went against the teachings of the Confucian school, was actually a sage recognized by the heavens and earth. Was this the heaven path will of the cloud world rejecting the teachings of the Confucian faction? At the same time, doubts arose in his heart. Was what he was doing right now right or wrong? Perhaps Sage Zhuzi had been a little too arbitrary back then and had acted too rashly. Even if this person said that he wanted to wipe out Confucianism, there was no need to be so anxious to make a ruler the enemy of Confucianism. Lin thought. He didn't think too much about it, and he didn't recognize what the saint ruler Qi was, or what the dragon and phoenix cry was. It wasn't until a moment later that he realized that the exotic beast wrapped in flames was the legendary auspicious beast, the Qilin. That brat is actually the sacred lord. Only at this moment did he finally understand why the 60,000-plus purple Qilin flame spear cavalry of the Dao sect would lose control of their mounts and be completely annihilated. Why were the attitudes of Snow House and Yuntai so weird? They were sure that Zhongshuan's yin-yang heart needle curse would be useless. He had indeed heard that the three ancient emperors of the Cloud Desolate era had the body of a sage monarch. After being stunned for a moment, Yin Yu's face immediately flushed red. Jealousy, dissatisfaction, envy, confusion, all kinds of complicated emotions rushed into his heart. This world is unfair. He, Yin Yu, was diligent and tireless. He had ruled the country for 100 years and had never missed a single morning court session. However, this Zhong Shou didn't care about politics, pushing all administrative matters to the officials. He followed the rules and followed the teachings of the Confucian faction. He treated the scholars well and didn't dare to make any mistakes. He fought with aristocratic families, with officials, with the 6 factions. To maintain the fate of the country, he pretty much spent all his effort. However, this Zhong Shou lived a carefree life, passing all his power to others. He knew that there were many sects and merchants, but he didn't suppress them. Instead, he supported them. It caused the sects in the country to be strong, many martial cultivators, and numerous merchants, leaving many problems. How could they be compared to him? Why was this Zhong Shou able to obtain the recognition of heaven and earth and be filled with saint energy? As for him, Yin Yu, he could only struggle bitterly. After today's battle, the country was showing signs of collapsing? His face was ashen white. Black blood flowed from the corner of Yin Yu's lips. At this moment, the entire battlefield suddenly quietened down. It was not only the Qian army that had stopped fighting. Even the remaining hundreds of thousands of Taishang soldiers stopped resisting, raising their heads and looking into the sky. What about the Qilin? Did I see wrongly? Qilin. The legendary auspicious beast Qilin. Born from eating good energy. Only in a prosperous era when the saint ruler is on the throne can it appear. Everywhere it passes, the weather will be good and the world will have a huge harvest. My ruler actually has a saint beast Qilin? In legends, didn't only the 3 ancient emperors have one? Which is why those Confucian faction scholars keep saying that they want to restore the rule of the 3 ancient emperors. They say that is when the human race of the cloud world was at its peak. At the start, it was only some people who were discussing in whispers. Not long later, it spread to the entire army. Speaking of which, that Zhu Zi from the Confucian faction said that the ruler is a tyrant, a muddle-headed ruler, going against the flow, messing with the rules. Is he just spouting nonsense? That is true. They say that he is the enemy of the Confucians, but the ruler has done so many bad things. How can His Highness be a muddle-headed ruler? The people of the world were all cheated by those Confucians. Tell me, is Sage Zhu Zi wrong, or is it the world's fault? The ruler is ruling the country. All the cities directly under our Donglin are all full and warm. My family's income is a full 15 to 16 times more than before. Although it is a little expensive to buy things, it is much better than before. In the past, there were many wars in Donglin, and we didn't even have enough to eat. However, after His Majesty unified Donglin, the riches of the cities are something that even the Central Cloud Continent people are envious of. Who knows how many merchants came to Deqian to live in the chaos of the Central Cloud Continent? It is obviously what the people want. After His Majesty took the throne, he was invincible, expanding 100 million miles. The country is prosperous and the people are at peace. This is the work of Minister Ren and concubine Yao, right? To have so many good officials working for Deqian, isn't he a saint ruler? I heard that His Majesty has expanded 76 worlds and built the Deqian celestial dynasty. He is really ambitious. Our Deqian merchants are building cloud ships and are prepared to expand their business to the outer region. At that time, our lives will be more prosperous. The entire battlefield went from silence to uproar in just an instant. At this moment, the people at the front of the Deqian army noticed that many of the enemies in front of them had placed down their weapons and knelt on the ground. The Shang army actually surrendered. This battle is already a hopeless situation, so what if they don't surrender? They are fighting an unjust battle to suppress the Saint Ruler. They are going against the heaven and earth. Even if they die, they won't be able to leave hell. Since he is the Saint Ruler, naturally, he won't treat them badly. The ruler is victorious today, and will sweep the cloud world and crush the Taishang. He will set a foundation that won't change. If I were them, I would also surrender to the ruler, to work for the Saint King and expand our territory. More and more Shang ruler soldiers totally gave up on resisting. Their weapons and armor were all thrown to the ground. It even affected the 200,000 Dao soldiers of the aristocratic families. Have you all heard about the oath that the ruler made in the common people's vast habitat a few months ago? There is actually such a thing? I have never heard of it before. I have heard of it. Although I am the ruler chosen by the people, I know that water can sink a boat, but it can also carry it. This is why I give the people power to rule. Under my rule, there is a difference between rich and poor, a difference between strong and weak, but there is no difference between noble and lowly. I use the law to rule the country such that the strong won't bully the weak. The ruler is the same as the people. If you break the law, you will be killed. I can't equalize the rich and the poor, I can't balance the power, but I swear to rule the people equally. I swear to protect the people of the world. I will hold this sword and swear to become the Heaven Emperor. I will become the ruler of the 33 skies, the emperor of the people, the ruler of the 10,000 celestials. Under my rule, no matter what race, people, celestials, we will all be treated equally. I might not be able to create a truly equal world, but I can rule the people, a fair world, and just laws. As the ruler of the Deqian country, I will use this sword to protect the people of the cloud world from being enslaved by the outside races and not let them suffer the calamity of war during the cloud desolate era. Everyone listened quietly, engraving each and every word in their hearts. Ruler of the 33 skies, Emperor of the people? Ruler of 10,000 celestials? Jun Shang is so bold. Using laws to rule the country, such that the strong won't bully the weak. The ruler and the people are the same. If they break the laws, then they will be beheaded? If he can do that, then he is a saint ruler that is hard to see in 10 million years. Even today, our Deqian isn't that bad. The officials are all elected by the people. Now, which noble dares to ignore us commoners? To be able to be born in this era and follow the ruler to expand our territory, sweep the cloud world, and even conquer the outer regions, it is really our fortune. Since the ruler has made such a vow, then we will hug him to the death. We will go through fire and water, we won't hesitate to die. They were all filled with emotions, unable to control themselves. I remember that the ruler also said that the Confucians have harmed people, too many to record. The doctrine of hiding from one another is harmful to the laws of the country. Who knows, maybe one day they will burn books and bury Confucians. Hiding from one another? There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that. Scoff. Hiding from one another, naturally the officials can protect one another. If this goes on and the laws of the country don't exist, how can we live? Speaking of which, the Confucians are afraid, which is why they treat the ruler as the enemy of the Confucians? That Zhu Zi didn't expect the ruler to be the saint ruler of the world, right? The people below were in deep discussion. Shuelai's face was ashen white. The discussions of the people showed that they were all against one another and couldn't be underestimated. Zhong Shou took in a deep breath and then slowly exhaled. Just you wait, you've really angered me this time. Chapter 1085. Just you wait, you have really pissed me off this time. Looking at the altar below and the corpses of the 3,000 kids around Zhongshuan, Zhong Shou felt a stabbing pain in his eyes. The vengeful energy on his sword became thicker and thicker. Although these 3,000 kids aren't my fault, they died because of me. With a slight flick of his sleeve, Xiari charged down from midair and pounced towards Taoist Master Zhong Xian. The latter's expression changed slightly and he instantly made a hand sign and a spell sword appeared. Ripples that could be seen with the naked eye spread out in all directions. However, the moment the spell was activated, it affected his injuries. Although he had entered Saint Realm a year ago, the Yin-Yang Heart Needle curse went against heaven and earth and would consume 1,000 years of his lifespan. At this moment, the backlash from the righteous energy of heaven and earth nearly swallowed all his true essence. His chakra meridians were broken. The amount of power he could use now was extremely little. The spell sword was smashed by Xiari's palm and then charged to his side. With a claw, Zhongshuan's head and body instantly turned into meat paste. Looking at Zhongshuan die, Zhong Shou felt that the pent-up anger in his chest was slightly vented. He really wanted to kill Zhongshuan, but at this moment, he could only do so. Then, he looked towards Xueli, his eyes filled with mocking intent. This is what your Confucian faction does? If you are unhappy with my actions and see me as an evil demon, you can just fight fair and square. It was even possible to assassinate him. Why do you need to use the lives of these 3,000 kids to use this evil technique? Why do you need to see them as ants and look down on their lives? Lu Li frowned. He wanted to say that this was done by Yin Yu and Zhongshuan and that it had nothing to do with him. Then, he thought about how he was there and knew about it. He shook his head. They are all children of sinners and deserve to die. There is no need to pity them. Deserve to die? Even if they deserve to be killed, they can be dealt with according to country laws. Why do you need to use such an evil technique to wipe out their souls such that they can't even reincarnate? Zhong Shou shook his head, his expression filled with disbelief. Your Confucian faction has a saying, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Is this how you, Lu Li, carry out the words of the saints? This muddle-headed ruler had done such an unethical thing, using such an evil technique. As one of the Confucian scholars, not only did you not try to dissuade him, you even agreed to it? Lu Li only felt his face turn red. He snorted coldly, what are you trying to say? There was no such thing as evil or righteous in this world. What was evil was the human heart. If I can kill you, I'll do anything. In other words, in order to get rid of me, you're willing to do anything to achieve your goal. Zhong Shou laughed coldly, his eyes filled with mockery. I know that the core of the Confucian teachings is the word benevolence. According to the Book of Rites, it is said that the love between upper and lower is called benevolence. The Book of Rites, Confucian Conduct, says that the one who is gentle and kind is the root of benevolence. Lu Li's heart tightened. He felt that Zhong Shou's words were like whips lashing his body. The Book of Rites, the 4 systems of mourning apparel. Those who speak of benevolence can observe their love. The Analects of Confucius, Yongyi, also said that a man who is benevolent is a man who stands up when he wants to stand up. Even your ancestor once said that from crying out one's grievances, the more one wishes to be pitiful and benevolent, the more wrong it is. Also, the Book of Rites, the mean. Those who speak of benevolence are humans. Note, humans are also people, read like dolls. Mencius said the same thing. Those who speak of benevolence are humans. If humans can't be benevolent, then how are they different from animals? Ask yourself, do your actions conform to the teachings of the saints? What face do you have to enter the Confucian faction? Are you worthy of the few saints of the Confucian faction? With each sentence he said, Lu Li's face turned a little whiter. The vital energy in his chest was weak, and there was a sweet taste in his throat. He was about to spit out blood. Only then did he realize that his Tao foundations were actually floating. He instantly understood. He knew that he was personally witnessing the saint ruler being questioned by these words, and his soul was being impacted. It actually caused him to start to doubt himself and doubt the Tao that he was practicing. This kid in front of him was really vicious. Zhong Shou touched his sword and smiled. Does Mr. Lu know that after today's victory, there will be 5 decrees that will be spread to the world? Lu Li didn't understand. Why did Zhong Shou choose such a time to say all this to him? However, it successfully made him curious as he listened solemnly. The first decree is to reorganize the 3 law divisions and think of a ministry to be independent of the Prime Minister. My Deqian officials and nobles will be under their jurisdiction. If there is a need, or if I break the laws of the country, then even I can ask about it and punish them. From now on, all corporal punishment will be abolished. Only a life for a life. Lu Li was stunned. Listening to what Zhong Shou said, the king was actually under the law. Even if a ruler broke the law, he would be punished like a commoner. As for corporal punishment, it was something that the Confucian faction chased for thousands of years but couldn't obtain. The ruler was worried about his subordinates rebelling, worried about the officials being greedy. This was why they set up the punishment of 9 generations of the family, slicing at the waist, etc. They didn't allow the Confucian faction to have a say. A strong landlord wanted his servants to listen to him, worried that the commoners would steal his wealth. This was why they had whipping, torture, etc. Although the Confucian faction chased after benevolence and forgiveness, the things they did often went against the law. Today, these ideals were going to be completed in the hands of this incapable ruler? Preposterous! How would this incapable ruler truly pity the commoners? Corporal punishment is cruel and harms the labor force. If the laws of the country were strict and the commoners were safe, why would they need to break the law? Why would we need to use cruel laws to warn them? Within Deqian, all corporal punishment can be replaced by labor. Harming the labor force? Replaced by labor? So that was the case. As expected, it wasn't because he pitied the commoners. Thinking about that in his heart, Lu Li bit his lips, his face turning purple. The second decree. Using the tax to subsidize the farmers, your Confucian faction is saying that our Deqian focuses on commerce and ignores agriculture, and that sooner or later we will collapse, right? In truth, our Deqian values workers, farmers, scholars, and merchants equally. Zhong Shou still understands the principles of farming and war. The income of the farmers is meager, and sooner or later everyone will have to work frequently. This is a huge problem. Since that is the case, then I will subsidize them so that they can farm peacefully. Lu Li scoffed coldly, but his heart was shocked. Privately, he had mocked Zhong Shou and Deqian's policies more than once. He said that even if the Taishang did not go on an expedition, China would collapse in a short while. However, he did not expect that Zhong Shou actually had such an idea to use the tax to subsidize the farmers. What a fantasy, however. Speaking of which, this problem of farming and grain could not possibly become a weakness for China. Workers, farmers, scholars, and merchants in the eyes of this ruler, were workers and farmers above scholars and merchants? The third decree. All the servants and workers in the world need to set a salary base and limit their working hours. Also, since the tax is taken from the commoners, it naturally needs to be used for the commoners. I will order the cabinet to push out retirement funds, so that the workers and farmers of the world won't be lonely in old age and can enjoy peace. Lu Li's eyes were filled with shock once more. Why was it such a weird country again? It is just buying people's hearts and wasting the country's resources. However, within Zhong Shou's pure white energy pillar, a thread of golden energy was actually born. It was still extremely pure and clean, but it was even more majestic. It made one feel like they were willing to bow down and worship it. Above, the dragon and phoenix roared once more. The dragon's roar was majestic, and the phoenix's cry was clear and crisp. Saint Emperor! Lu Li's eyes constricted once more. Before this, Zhong Shou was only a king, a wise king. At this moment, he could be compared to the three ancient saint emperors. However, what kind of mysteries did Zhong Shou's country policy have to actually cause such a huge change in his luck? To cause the world to be so happy? To cause the strength of the country to be so prosperous? Zhong Shou shook his head. It was really difficult for the people of this era to understand the concept of spending. Only when they were old and worry-free would the people of the cloud world be willing to spend money and not hide their hard-earned money in their own cellars to rot. The Confucians always said that they wanted to hide wealth among the people, but what was the point of doing so? The Qian country's wealth, rather than storing it in the treasury, why not return it to the people? The fourth decree is to clear out the land. Officials and gentry all take in grain. From today onwards, all land transactions will be banned. The Deqian imperial court will invest money to buy and sell to the landless commoners, to equalize the land of the world. At this moment, not only Lu Li, but even Yuntai's body shook. Wasn't this Zhong Shou afraid of offending all the nobles in his country? Wasn't he afraid of people rebelling? No, what did this Zhong Shou have to fear? He controlled 3 million undefeatable troops and even defeated the Taishang. He was respected by the people of the world, and his reputation within Deqian was unparalleled. Such a country policy benefited everyone. Even if the aristocratic families were unhappy, they couldn't go against such a trend. Due to the Confucian faction, many of the Deqian disciples who were taught by saints broke away from the Deqian imperial court and even colluded with the Taishang. Even if they wanted to stop it, they couldn't. After today's battle, they had to be wary of Zhong Shou and settle scores with him, settling the crime of betraying the country. Equalize the land of the world. He remembered that when the Taishang Taizu started the war, he had mentioned it. After he unified the world, he didn't do anything about it. Zhong Shou's methods were much gentler and more feasible. Maybe he might succeed. Lu Li's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He understood that the moment the 4 decrees were out, close to 90% of the people's hearts would be swept away. How would the Confucians deal with this? Although this wasn't burning books, it was 10 times more vicious than what the Qin emperor did in the past. If the people's hearts were lost, how could the Confucians claim to be the only righteous sect in the world? Looking at it with his eyes, he saw that the golden energy glow above Zhong Shou's head had silently increased by 100 feet. My 5th decree is to gather all the scholars in the world to comment on the Confucian faction. Talk about the merits of the Confucian faction, talk about their faults, talk about their teachings. He paused. A cruel smile appeared at the corner of Zhong Shou's lips. Naturally, today, Yin ordered this evil cultivator to use 3,000 kids to perform this evil technique. You didn't help and didn't look at it. What would the people of the world think about this? Yinu's body shook, his fists clenched tightly. This Zhong Shou wanted to make the Taishang and Yin be despised by the people of the world? Black blood seeped down from the corner of Lu Li's lips. He was in a daze and gave out a tragic laugh. What a saint ruler! Your words really hurt my heart. I, Lu Li, am the sinner of the Confucians. It's a mistake, a big mistake. He actually used his own sword to kiss his neck. A sword light flashed. Lu Li's head fell down amidst the bloodlight. Chapter 1086. Lu Li kissed his neck and died. Zhong Shou's eyes didn't even blink. He was a little emotional. However, this wasn't the time to pity his opponent. At least you have some guts. If he was a shameless person, then his words today would have been for nothing. This Luli wasn't a true hypocrite. Then, he looked towards Inu. Zhong Shou laughed coldly. Luli was already dead, so who else could protect this Deqian ruler? He casually slashed out like a white cloud shooting through the air, directly stabbing towards Inu's throat. Stop! Yuntai Jinren was anxious. He was filled with rage towards Luli, who had already died. The Confucian faction people were like that. The more prominent a Confucian scholar was, the more important he would be to his reputation and the evaluation of his character by the world. In history books, there were many people who died to prove their loyalty. This Luli was the same. However, why didn't he look at the situation now? Even if he wanted to kill himself, why not after this battle ended? At this moment, if Inu died, the Taoist faction and Confucian faction would lose their last bit of ability to go against Zhong Shou. The blood-colored blade light swept over once more. Circle after circle covered down, forcing Yuntai to be unable to break free. Inu's eyes were filled with rage and despair. However, just as he was about to die, the space beside him was forcefully ripped open. A fist suddenly struck over. The fist wasn't big or small, the skin was like white jade, even more delicate than a girl's. However, when it struck through the air, it was like the entire heaven and earth was sucked into the fist. The sword and fist clashed, instantly a wall-like energy spread out. It caused the space to start to collapse. Zhong Shou's brow rose up. He didn't even need to think to know who this person was. Shi Yue. This fellow still came in the end. He wasn't willing to sit still and watch as Inu died here. That is me. I don't want to be enemies with ruler, but I have no choice. They were pretty much on the same level, forcing back the sword light. The fist retracted, bringing Inu's body to retreat out of the void. His Majesty is the ruler of the world. He can't fall here. Zhong Shou didn't feel shocked or angry. His thoughts were still calm as he slashed out with a sword. For my Deqian, I won't let him escape. The sword energy 100,000 feet of sword energy chased into the void. The voice on the other side scoffed coldly. Heaven's seal. He opened his fist and formed a hand seal. It smashed it, STS. Looking at it, this sword of decent quality actually had a hole in it. When Linzest STs. A tease to beat to STS. Several coughs of a young man spread out in the void like he was in pain. What a slaying sword. Not seeing you for a few years, ruler's sword path has become so strong. If I am free, I really want to spar with ruler in the martial path. His voice became softer and softer. Shi Yue and Inu's men had fled far away. Zhong Shou didn't bother, frowning as he looked at the sword in his hand. The strike just now seemed like he had the upper hand, causing Shi Yue's injuries to be not light. However, the entire Deqian's country's strength merged into the sword. It was also when the country's fate was changing and was flourishing. Even then, Shi Yue was still able to save them and leave safely. Emperor God Fist again. This 12th-tier world-destroying Imperial Dao Grand Art was truly impressive. Even hundreds of worlds away, he was able to borrow the strength of the country? Using power as the bone, strength as the muscle. The bigger the power, the stronger the strength. However, the core of it was the word Dharma. Zhong Shou's martial path cultivation improved by leaps and bounds, but this Shi Yue seemed to be even stronger than him. As expected, this person used laws as his foundations. He first had his own Dao path, and then gave birth to tens of thousands of technique. This was why his cultivation was difficult at first and then easy. In the past, what he learned was really messy. Only after he stepped into the spirit realm did he try to merge many techniques to form his own Dao path. This was easy at first and then difficult. At this moment, Shi Yue might not have exceeded him, but he could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. He was ashamed. He relied on numerous fortuitous encounters, the Lu family world burning blood, Xian Shuang's master's spirit dream-inducing technique, as well as the imperial demon slaying sword diagram to reach his current realm. This Shuriyue didn't have a bloodline legacy like him, so he might not be luckier than him. Sure enough, he deserves to be the hero that dominated the world and made the xenorace of the Outer Realm submit to him. He was really lucky to have such an opponent. Laughing involuntarily, the emotions in Zhong Shou's chest calmed down. Brother Sure, you can save Inu, but you can't save the 16 million troops north of Min River. You can't save the Taishang country that is on the verge of collapse, so why bother? Thank you, ruler, for your reminder. Shuyue's final laugh spread out. As a general, one must know how to give up and give up. I can't do anything about the 16 million troops, and I know that Commander Kong has made arrangements. However, I have my own way to protect our Taishang. When the word Shang landed, Shuyue's aura totally disappeared. For a full 10 breaths, Zhong Shou was still unable to lock onto where he was. When Inu left, Yuntai was delighted. Then, he saw Zhong Shou's cold gaze looking over. He was shocked. Only then did he realize that he was still in a desperate situation. He wanted to struggle to the death, but he saw that cold sword slash through the void with an irresistible strength. Heaven Path. Yuntai instinctively thought back to the common people's 7 sword. It seemed right but wasn't. It was still the slaying sword intent, but it had some heaven path power. Was this helping the heavens to punish evil? Looking at Zhong Shou, he noticed that even the person who used the sword didn't notice that there was something wrong with the sword. So that was the case. Zhong Shou had the Saint Emperor body and was buffed by the will of heaven and earth. Normally, there wouldn't be any problems. However, once one was hated by heaven and earth or something that heaven and earth were jealous of, one's combat strength would multiply. This was helping the heavens to enforce justice. Any evil demon that was hated by the heavens would be really weak under Zhong Shou's sword. Forget it. He would just give up his body for the Taoist faction. He just didn't know if what he did today was right or wrong, a blessing or a curse for the Taoist faction. Yuntai gave up all thoughts of resistance and simply closed his eyes. He allowed the sword to shine on his body and rip his soul to shreds. So easily? Shock appeared in Zhong Shou's eyes. He originally thought that even if he worked together with Chu Shui to totally kill this person, they would need at least 5 to 6 rounds. They also had to prevent him from going all out at the brink of death. Who knew that this person didn't have any thoughts of resisting at all? Weird. Zhong Shou shook his head. He didn't have the mood to think about it. Maybe this person regretted his actions, or maybe he couldn't think straight. Looking down, the battle in front of Jiuqi Palace was coming to an end. Most of the Taishang army had surrendered. Only a portion of the elite Dao soldiers raised by the various aristocratic families were still resisting. Those tens of thousands of demon cavalry had already retreated. Unfortunately, the tunnel was too narrow. Close to a third of them died under the swords of the common people's mysterious dragon warriors. A large portion of them didn't dare to wait at the entrance of the tunnel, spreading out in all directions. They charged into the swamps and forests. Just by looking at the situation, one could see that it was already not bad if even a tenth of these demon steeds managed to escape. Leaving without fighting would cause the great Shang army to collapse, but at the end of the day, did they preserve some strength for the demon sect? Zhong Shou smiled, causing everyone who saw it to feel a chill down their spines. Assassinating his officials, massacring his people, how would he let the demon path sects off? How would he give the demon sect a chance to breathe? He stepped in the air to the side of the Blood Saint Demon Lord. This person was facing Ao Kuan in the air. Ao Kuan smiled and didn't attack. However, this demon sect peak saint realm didn't dare to easily flee. Zhong Shou walked 1,000 feet away, looking forward with a teasing expression. This demon lord was below one person and above tens of thousands of people in the demon path. I remember that a month ago you said that. Within this month, you won't be able to eat, won't be able to sleep, and will be worried every day. A month later will be when I, Zhong Shou, die. The Blood Saint Demon Lord's face turned green. Do you think you won? That you can kill me today? Zhong Shou was stunned. Looking closely, he understood. He calmly shook his head. So, it is an incarnation. The person in front of him wasn't the main body, but an incarnation with at least 90% of the main body's strength. However, forget it, the higher the combat strength, the more expensive the incarnation was. To be able to cause the incarnation of the Blood Saint Demon Lord to die here, it would also cause him to feel heart-wrenching pain. The Blood Saint Demon Lord laughed coldly. Without waiting for Zhong Shou to attack, a layer of blood-colored flames burned around his body. It burned his body bit by bit. Zhong Shoxin knew that the Blood Saint self-ignited not because he wasn't willing to fight back, but because he didn't even have the courage to fight. It was to prevent Ao Kuan from destroying the path foundations of the incarnation, which would also affect the main body. He looked on quietly from the side and didn't stop him. Our grievances have already been settled and can't be solved. Today I will also give you a sentence. From today on, I will make you unable to sleep at night and live in fear. Until you die under my sword. The Blood Saint Demon Lord was startled. He thought about something and his expression changed once more. He reached out and wanted to grab Zhong Shou. However, his entire body turned to dust. You're a decisive person. You made me unable to get close to you at all. Ao Kuan laughed and looked towards Zhong Shou. Are you really prepared to pay such a price for this person? If I don't, I won't be able to vent my hatred. Zhong Shou nodded his head. Even if he lost this chance to swallow up the mid-planes, he would wipe out all the demon path sects within. Moreover, with Shuyue here, his chances were really small. With this person's ability, he definitely had a way to stop him. When Zhong Shou returned to the carriage, he saw that Kong Yao was holding a talisman and was in deep thought. Zhong Shou's brow rose and he snatched it. Then, he understood. Just 4 hours ago, 130 warships and 700,000 soldiers had landed in the southern wind region. Surround Wei to save Zhao, attacking where the enemy was going to save. Chapter 1087. Let's take a risk. Actually, that south wind cloud continent might not be a place we have to save. Kong Yao took in a deep breath. Ardachian still has 300,000 troops there. A month ago, we recruited millions of cultivators and can still hold on for a while. At this moment, if we can take advantage of the internal chaos in the Taishang to take over the mid-plains, we just need to spend some effort to deal with the 700,000 troops of the Shi family. However, what I am worried about is that Shuyue's methods won't stop there. To go against Ardachian, Shuyue naturally wouldn't only have such methods. At this moment, the one who spoke was Zhang Huai, who was walking in the air. Before this, he was hiding in the Jiuqi Palace to watch the battle. Now that the army had won, he ran out and coincidentally heard the two of them speak. Don't forget that his father Shi Qianli is the South Settling General, North Suzhou Provincial Governor. He controls 7 provinces in one continent, close to 200,000 troops. Zhong Shou and Kong Yao exchanged glances with one another. The two of them didn't know about this matter. A grave expression appeared on the latter's face. Shi Qianli? The Shi family was one of the aristocratic families in the Taishang that was only weaker than the 5 big families. Because of the Yuanshan emperor, they were not famous for many years. However, Kong Yao had heard of this person before. His ability to use troops was no weaker than Fein, and he might even be better. There were legends in the North Desolate Army. With Fein as the commander, he could cause the northern barbarians to return in defeat. However, with Shi Qianli as the commander, those tribes wouldn't dare to invade the south. He is just the North Suzhou provincial governor, and he has less than 200,000 troops. For Great Shang to conquer the south, I'm afraid they have already used up all their elite troops. However, there is still a Shuriwe. Zhang Huai shook his head. The world that Shuriwe rules is different from the Deqian celestial dynasty, where he is surrounded by enemies and needs to defend against the shadow demon and night demon races. He definitely won't only bring back 700,000 troops. The key is that 100 Victory Pass and that Yangtze River. Zhong Shou thought for a moment and understood Zhang Huai's intention. Baixing Pass was located east of Taishang, west of Jixi, close to Ganshi Island. The terrain was strategic, guarding the southeast. As long as there were enough soldiers to block this place, even if there were tens of millions of soldiers, it would be difficult to break through. As for the Yangtze River, in this Taishang water system, the situation was the opposite of the Min River. The Taishang's boat masters were flourishing there, while the Taishang side was completely empty. Even the narrowest part of the Yangtze River was more than 40,000 feet long. Without the protection of the warships, it was almost impossible for the Deqian army to cross the river. As the North Suzhou provincial governor, Shi Qianli had the power to use the strength of the navy. Was he going to cut his wrist? Completely abandon the 5 southern provinces, concentrate the 1,000,000 troops, and guard the 100 Victory Pass, thus protecting the rest of the Taishang's territory? Was this what Shi Yu meant when he said that a general needed to know how to make a choice? It is still the same problem as before. Kong Yao shook her head. Shi Qianli is only the North Suzhou provincial governor. His power is limited. He can't control Jixi. Even if he saves Yin Yu and gets the decree from Emperor Yuanqin, he can control the war in the southeast. He needs time to move troops. The south is flat, and if I attack with the cavalry, Shi Qianli won't be able to do anything. He could have just falsified the decree. Seeing Zhong Shou and Kong Yao both stunned, they couldn't help but laugh. Zhang Huai smiled. With Emperor Yuanqin's current situation, he won't have time to bother about all this. Instead, he will rely heavily on you. Moreover, this matter is really beneficial to the Shi family. Do you think Shi Qianli won't dare? The aristocratic families of the Mid-Plains are all famous for being bold and domineering. Kong Yao was astonished. Only then did she realize that her way of thinking was totally different from those aristocratic families. At that time, she was a general in Shang and was really loyal. She didn't dare to go against His Majesty's orders and treated them as imperial decrees. However, these aristocratic families were different. Within their own land, they didn't even bother about the country laws. Other people wouldn't be able to do such a thing. As the head of the Shi family, Shi Qianli didn't feel any pressure at all. He also wouldn't worry about Emperor Yuanqin's feelings. If that was the case, then it would be really problematic. Actually, this is a good thing. Using a snake to swallow an elephant. Even if we can swallow it, our Deqianli will have to face more problems. If we aren't careful, our stomach will burst. Why don't we build up our foundations after this battle and then make plans? Jiangnan was also rich, the land of fish and rice. Their grain production was several times that of other places. Furthermore, the population was really dense. Mined stone veins were only weaker than Huizhou's. Taxes pretty much took up half of Taishang's land. Its income was comparable to 7 Tianfang world. However, due to corruption and the aristocratic families controlling it, most of the income went into private pocket. Although the martial culture here was slightly weaker, it complemented that of the south of Donglin. If we manage it well, we can unify the cloud world for Deqianli, our foundations that won't change. Like he was worried that Zhong Shou and Kong Yao wouldn't be satisfied, Zhang Huai spoke without stopping. Zhong Shou didn't feel disappointed. Actually, to be able to swallow these 5 states was already really satisfying to him. It was a huge joy. Be it in the past or the future, these 5 states in the south were the essence of the cloud world. They were heavily taxed. They just needed to sweep out the evil energy and get rid of all the problems. Just these 5 states alone would be able to surpass Donglin Cloud Continent in a few years. Without going all out on the military, it wouldn't be a problem to provide for tens of millions of troops. At this moment, his thoughts weren't here anymore. De Qianli is already formed, there's no need to take risk. After this battle, you can order Ren Tianxing to lead 800,000 elites to South Wind Cloud Continent. The remaining troops will be led by concubine Yao, Zhang Huai you will assist. After crushing the Shang army north of Min River, you will be in charge of attacking the mid-plains. You have the power to make decisions. Kong Yao and Zhang Huai bowed and accepted the order. Although there were still tens of millions of Taishang troops north of Min River, the two of them didn't care about them at all. Without Dao soldiers supporting, they just needed to use cavalry to cut off their path of retreat and cut off their grain. At most, in 10 days, these 16 million troops would collapse. Zhong Shou gave them the power to make decisions for the Shi family. If that 100 victory pass was blocked by the Shi family, then they could stop at the few states south of Taishang. However, if they didn't, then De Qianli didn't need to be courteous. As for South Wind Cloud Continent, the 700,000 troops of the Shi family wouldn't be a problem. The 4 million cultivators and spirit masters that Qiu Wei recruited were being trained. As long as South Wind Cloud Continent could stabilize and suppress the rebellious cities. At most, in 3 months they would be able to stabilize. If Shuriwen knew what was good for him, then he should have retreated. Expand the Blood Cloud Cavalry to 50,000 and try to recruit Grade 6 experts to train 30,000 Black Fox Iron Cavalry in the Cloud World. Apart from that, you can choose elites from the army. A sharp glow appeared in Samuraim's eyes. Send out a decree to wipe out the demons. Order all the cultivators in the world to chase and kill the demon sect disciples. Kill a Grade 9 disciple, and you will be rewarded with Grade 8 mind stones. The higher one's cultivation, the higher the reward. The Great Qian Book Depository could also be opened. As long as one killed more than 100 people, one could choose any of the Grade 7 and above martial arts and spells in the book depository to copy. This time I am going to wipe out all the demons. It was mainly martial arts. This time Zhong Shou collected many martial arts and spiritual techniques when he was outside. The main thing was that a small portion of the 9 capital celestial dynasties' treasures had landed in his hands. There were also those close to 200 celestial realm cultivators in the 9 extreme death jail, who each had their own legacies. Grade 8 Absolute Earth, Grade 9 Heaven Shocking, and even Grade 10 Saint Spirit. Naturally, Zhong Shou didn't care about them. However, to those factionless cultivators in the cloud world who lacked resources, they were really precious. If they missed this chance, it wouldn't be so easy to find top techniques in the future. Kong Yao and Zhang Huai weren't surprised. In the past, the Taoist faction did something similar. However, Zhong Shou charged into the central continent and wiped out 37 sections. They could also see that the vengeful energy in Zhong Shou's chest had been accumulated for a long time. It wasn't easy for him to bear with it until now. At this point, there was no need for him to bear with it anymore. The demon sect Dao soldiers were pretty much all wiped out. Apart from End Realm and Saint Realm experts who could restrict 1 or 2, the demon sect had no way to go up against De Qianli. Those few spiritual houses, spiritual mountains, and shrines were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. However, this meant that they would have to split their forces. They would take down 100 Victory Pass and continue to spy on the southwest of Taishang. From the upper reaches of Yangtze River, the chances of them entering the mid-plains would be much smaller. However, firstly, the chances were really small. Secondly, they knew that Zhong Shoxin had already made up his mind and they couldn't persuade him anymore. Thus, they kept silent and didn't say anything. They only had some objections to the rewards that Zhong Shou gave out. Ruler, our De Qianli doesn't have many mind stones and we need to raise an army. Why don't we open up martial arts and spells? Ruler's conditions are also a little low. Those who kill 100 demon sect disciples can choose grade 7 techniques and spells. As for the 8th grade, it required at least 1,000 people or at least 10 spirit realm devil cultivators. Grade 9 requires 10 celestial realm. Demon sect techniques are special and can be detected from corpses, so we aren't afraid of people faking it. Zhongsho's brow rose up. He didn't comment, but it was a silent agreement. At this moment, the outer region of the sky slowly calmed down. The endless heavenly sky forbidden spatial devilish formation that had been set up by the 3 Tao integration stage devilish Confucian sects had already been withdrawn. The spiritual senses of those few end realm experts didn't spread out in the air. The cloud layer above the battlefield spread out and threads of sunlight shone down. The private Tao soldiers of those aristocratic families were crushed by the blood cloud cavalry led by Zhong Yuan. At this moment, they had no way to fight back and had to surrender. Samuraim's eyes were cold as he looked into the void. Although those people had left, those wills were still firmly locked onto him, lingering around him without dispersing. Wisps of malice surged toward him. Zhongsho laughed coldly and didn't fear it at all. If those few end realm experts didn't personally attack, just their spiritual senses wouldn't be able to crush him. While Zhongsho looked into the sky, the soldiers below were looking at him. Along with the yin power of the yin-yang heart needle dissipating, the white energy pillar disappeared without a trace. Xiari retracted his Qilin form and laid lazily on Zhongsho's shoulder. However, under the shine of the sun, the white jade imperial carriage was wrapped in a 7-colored spiritual glow, making it look really divine. Saint King. One person knelt down and the hundreds of thousands of people on the battlefield all knelt down. Long live the Saint Ruler! Our De Qian is invincible and invincible! A tsunami-like voice swept over. Zhang Huai smiled and bowed. If you don't have a proper name, then you won't be able to speak properly. Your subject requests your majesty to proclaim yourself as emperor. Chapter 1088. In Gantian Mountain City, all the tea houses and restaurants were filled with guests. It wasn't that during the Taishang War, these people still had the mood to eat and drink. Instead, they gathered here on their own accord. In this place where news gathered and spread, they waited for news and rumors from the central continent. Since a month ago, the people of Gantian Mountain City were in a state of panic. Even if they had enough confidence in Zhongsho, the 18 million troops of the Taishang were suppressing them. If it was before, normal people wouldn't know about the existence of the 6 factions and the various sections. However, De Qian had many dojos. The ruler was weird. Not only did he not allow sects, but he even encouraged them to open dojos to recruit disciples. This was why in De Qian, even normal civilians knew about the strength of the 6 factions. Not to mention the Confucians, the Taoists were in charge of the cultivation world and had 3,000 sections. Not to mention the commoners, they were undoubtedly the top faction in the cloud world. The demon path wasn't much weaker and also had numerous subordinate sections. The 3 factions working together made one's heart heavy. Every day when they had nothing to do, the people of Gantian Mountain City would gather in the tea houses and restaurants to discuss the matters in the east. Jinyu Pavilion was a tea house in the south of Gantian Mountain City. It was famous for its elegance and style. Opposite it was the branch of Linhai College in Gantian Mountain City. At this moment, Gantian Mountain City was a prosperous city comparable to the imperial capital. De Qian also supported dojos and colleges to educate and open up the wisdom of the people. This place was said to be the branch of Linhai College, but the head of the college had the intention to move the college here. However, at this moment, the doors were tightly shut. Although that was the case, Jinyu Pavilion was still filled with Confucians. Apart from that, there were many rich merchants nearby. Instead, it was even more lively than usual. It has already been a month and the Taishang army still hasn't broken through Min River? This Kong Yao is actually so amazing. Using 3 million people to fight 6 times their number, the army actually has no way to take advantage of them. She is just using the geography of Min River and that navy. I don't think she can last for long. Demon woman betraying her lord. I'm willing to lower myself. De Chien did not offend people with his words, and his words were without restraint. Therefore, as long as it wasn't intentional, one wouldn't be guilty. However, when the Confucian scholar said these words, the surrounding people's expressions only changed slightly before they acted as if nothing had happened. They were all fearless. De Chien was now in a precarious situation. Who knows, it might collapse the next day. At this time, who would dare to inform the authorities, and who would dare to punish them for their crimes? If he were to go to prison, it would not be a bad thing. On the contrary, he would be able to gain prestige among the scholars and become a famous scholar. I can't say that I'm a traitor, but I'm still an accomplice to the evildoer. I don't know right from wrong. I heard that Zhong Shou had recruited hundreds of thousands of barbarians in the southern border a few months ago and built a Jiuqi palace. Imitating the ancient Jie Zhou's extravagance, he also took in tens of thousands of beautiful women. The soldiers at the front are fighting a bitter battle, but he enjoys himself every night, and even indulges himself in debauchery during the day. As expected, he is licentious and immoral. Wasn't it the same before the expedition? He almost never paid attention to national affairs. He sure has good luck with women, but I wonder how long he can enjoy it for? In the end, he is a barbarian king. He can't compare to the Mid-Plains Saint Army. This so-called De Chien will definitely fall. Within the restaurant, not everyone was on the same side as these Confucian scholars. At this moment, most of them kept silent. However, there were some who were filled with righteous rage. What nonsense are you spouting? After the ruler ascended, he swept the 6 directions and never lost. The country's political system is clear. The country is rich and the people are strong. Swept the 6 directions and never lost? Hey, he was undefeated in the past, but that doesn't mean he won't be defeated in the future. It is just because he hasn't met an opponent. Political system is clear? A bunch of officials chosen by ignorant commoners. What do these people know? Doesn't that mean that whoever is rich will get more benefits? Who can become an official? So what? If those rich merchants want to become officials, they need to give us enough benefits. Ignorant. Why would such people become officials, so why would they care about the people? Our Confucian school disciples are taught by the saint. Everyone wants to rule the world and restore the 3 ancient emperors. In the eyes of that Zhong Shou, they are useless people who should be killed. Even if they are used, they can only be officials and can't be the main official of a region. Even if they are lucky enough to become officials, they still need to be supervised by the meeting hall. What kind of logic is that? Then do they need an imperial exam? I don't see how good the De Chien is. This is a system that has been passed down for 10,000 years. It has created several generations of matters. How can you barbaric people know the benefits? You all slander and scold us. Once our De Chien returns victorious, let's see how the ruler will deal with you all. Haha, I'm afraid he won't have that chance. Sacrificing myself for a righteous cause, why would I fear death? However, there were also people who gathered at the side and discussed softly. They didn't join in the argument. Everyone's faces were filled with worry. The Taishang focuses on agriculture, scholars, farmers, merchants. If we win, who knows what will happen to us? Will we be exploited by those aristocratic families? Although the current De Chien regime is a little preposterous, it is still not enough. We don't need to worry about those nobles extorting us. As long as we have enough money, we can even control the country's politics. If it was the Taishang, that might not be the case. You all don't need to be so lucky. I moved over from the mid-plains. The current Taishang is like tigers and the officials are like wolves. In their eyes, we are like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Unfortunately, the ruler doesn't accept donations and also doesn't raise taxes. If it is for this battle, even if I donate half of my fortune, I am willing. It isn't that serious. We still have hundreds of thousands of miles of cloud ocean. At this moment, within the Jinyu Pavilion, there was only one place that was totally silent. The three people sitting there were all silent as they quietly listened to the conversation. Two of them looked to be in their 30s. The one sitting beside them was a teen around 16 or 17 years old. His actions were really mature and his expression was solemn. Brother Yangming, what do you think? Who will win this battle of Shang and Gan? The one who said these words was Nan facing north. His skin was tanned but he looked extraordinary. At this moment, his tone was filled with the intention of asking for advice. Wenwei, why are you asking me such a question? The person who was called Yangming shook his head and laughed. However, his expression turned serious. Wenwei, it isn't like you don't know the current situation of the Taishang? The grain depots in the world are actually empty. An army of 18 million sounded majestic and awe-inspiring. However, the grain that the Taishang amassed over the years can only provide for a month. Looking at the Deqian people, I have seen people worried about the battle, people scolding, but have they worried about food and clothing? That Wenwei was a really smart person and instantly understood what he meant. Speaking of which, Brother Yangming doesn't have high hopes for the Taishang? You think that if this drags on, the Taishang will definitely lose? The Deqian people didn't worry about food and clothing. This meant that this battle hadn't exceeded the limits that the Deqian country could take. Based on what he knew, within the mid-plains, many people were fleeing. Commoners were displaced from their homes, and some places were even riddled with corpses. It wasn't because of natural disasters but because of people. I see that Kong Yao's strategy is very methodical, as expected of an unparalleled commander. Not to mention a month, even if you give the Taishang half a year, they might not be able to break through the Min River. That Yangming held the wine cup in his hand and said in deep thought, His Majesty didn't know before the battle, but now he should have noticed the situation and would try to break out of it. Looking at the Deqian ruler, he doesn't want to drag on any longer. This is why there are still many variables in this battle. Victory and defeat will be decided within 10 days. However, Shorin is still looking at the Deqian ruler. His Majesty probably isn't his match. That Wenwei immediately hissed and sucked in a breath of cold air. He knew that the person in front of him was not only the top of the cloud world in terms of literary talents. His martial path and art of war were also the top in the world, no weaker than the so-called geniuses of the world. Especially his art of war. In terms of troops, no one in the same generation was his opponent. Every time there was a war, this person's judgment was always right. Although he mocked himself for being an armchair strategist, in his eyes, his good friend wasn't someone who could only brag. If he could lead 1,000,000 troops and fight on the battlefield, he might be someone like Kong Yao. He could rule when he was off the horse and lead troops when he was on the horse. He was an all-round talent. His archery skills could even kill a Saint Realm expert within 1,000 miles. The Taishang faced the enemy with 6 times the number of troops, and this person actually predicted that the Taishang would lose. This battle concerned the battle for supremacy in the cloud world, who would belong to the south of the Central Plains. If it was as he expected, then the world was about to change. The teen beside him was a little unhappy. Teacher, that Zhong Shou is someone that Zhu Zi chose as the enemy of Confucianism. This person built a wine pool and meat forest during the country fate battle. He probably isn't a good ruler. How would our Taishang lose to him? Emperor Yuanshan is also the hero of the Taishang. How can he be compared to him? That Yang Ming chuckled and didn't argue with him. He only used a hand knife to knock the teen's head. Seeing is believing. Donglin is such a barbaric land, how can it be so prosperous? That Zhong Shou is such a person, how can he easily believe what others say? The teen exclaimed. He was furious but didn't dare to say anything. His teacher never talked reason with him at such times, only using violence to speak. At this moment, he could only say in embarrassment, Mengzi said, "Those who use strength to convince people won't be convinced because their strength is weak. Those who use virtue to convince people will be convinced." You want to use reason to convince people? Zhongxi, you seem to have memorized that sentence well. Yang Ming laughed, not holding back at all as he used a hand knife to knock the teen's head. I am teaching you not to argue with reason. Even if you want to refute my words, you need to take out a logical argument. Our Confucianism has many conflicts because we don't have logic. We have to investigate this. Wen Wei smiled. I heard that during these 10 years, the emperor didn't do anything. When that ruler was in charge, it was really rare. Instead of saying that it was the work of the ruler, it was better to say that it was the work of a wise minister. He smiled. Moreover, it is also true that the great Shang ruler is building a palace in the south. That is what I don't understand. Yang Ming shook his head. After the Qin and Han dynasties, they all said that it was best to not do much in politics. The early death of the Qin Sui can be used as a lesson. However, looking at this Deqian country, there is construction everywhere. However, looking at the people of Donglin, do they look like they are in a difficult situation? Chapter 1089. After the Qin and Han dynasties, they all said that it was better to have less taxes and not do much in politics. The early death of the Qin Sui can be a lesson learned. However, looking at the Deqian country, there is a lot of construction going on. However, looking at the people of Donglin, do they show any signs of hardship or unwillingness? Speaking of this, Wen Wei was also rather puzzled. Speaking of which, it is weird. In the Deqian country, roads and cities have been renovated in recent years. Not caring about the strength of the people, China is the best. However, the people don't find it tough and instead find it joyful. Apart from those vassal cities, all the land directly under them is prosperous. He sighed and said, thinking about it, it should be related to the Deqian abolishing the corvée labor. All the projects are done with a lot of money to recruit strong people. The Deqian imperial court and the high officials are afraid that the money in the treasury can't be used. However, I still haven't figured out the economics within. Those merchants said that money can make money. Yang Ming nodded and said, Shorin also didn't figure out the details. I only roughly guessed that it has something to do with the circulation of money and spirit stones. That is why I invited Brother Nye to come to the Deqian. Let's walk around and take a look. However, the way that Zhong Shou is doing goes against the teachings of the saints. The teen frowned. For example, abolishing the imperial examinations and the meeting hall. How can a wise ruler treat scholars so harshly? Thus, the third hand knife landed on the teen's head. Zhongxi, what the saints say might not be right. The headmaster of the academy once said that there would always be someone to learn from. Even saints had times when they did not know things and made mistakes. Times have changed, and the principles of the ancient times might not be suitable for today. We can't scold and reject just because we don't understand and feel disgusted. The meeting hall is set up to choose officials from the people. Isn't that treating scholars like us well? In the 10,000 years of our Confucian faction, many people chased 3 generations of rule to revive the ancient Zhou dynasty. Actually, there are also many people who know about the dangers of a strong ruler and want to restrict it. We can't control the world and have no control over it. Thus, there was the theory of Dong Sheng being connected to the heavens. You can only treat the symptoms but not the root of the problem. The affairs of the world should be shared with the world. It is not for the master of the world to be private. It is to treat the world as the world, not to treat oneself as the world. Although it is not easy for 10,000 generations, it is still possible. Since the Deqian monarch has already limited his sovereign power and included himself in the rules of etiquette, then he should not be allowed to do so. This could be said to have fulfilled the wishes of countless predecessors of the Confucian school. However, since the monarch has limited his own power, what law does he have to control the officials? With just a few words, Wen Wei fell into deep thought. Even the young man, who was rubbing his head with a look of dissatisfaction, remained silent. At the same time, on the second floor of Tonight Rain Pavilion, there was a different scene. A few middle-aged men dressed in scholarly attire were chatting and laughing, full of joy. In that case, His Majesty is already preparing to launch a surprise attack on the Jiuqi Palace? Exactly. This time, the three factions worked together to teleport the 800,000-strong army thousands of miles away. Together, they sealed off the outer realm. That Zhong Shou won't even be able to escape. If the monarch does not keep the secret, he will lose his subject. If the subject does not keep the secret, he will lose his chastity. Aren't you afraid that the news will be leaked, causing that incapable ruler to be wary? No worries, this was 4 hours ago. We only found out after the three factions and the Emperor army attacked. Who knows, maybe at this moment, victory has already been decided over at the Jiuqi Palace. The name God Falling Plains is really fitting. I have to congratulate Brother Yu. This time, you caused all the colleges in Donglin Cloud Continent to close. You also caused the Confucians of Donglin to resign from the Deqian dynasty. With such achievements, you can become a minister in the imperial court and your name will spread far and wide. With Brother Yu's 20 years of experience in Linhai College, entering White Deer Cave College is a sure thing. That's right. Which one of the teachers of White Deer Cave College isn't a famous Confucian? Which one of them isn't famous in history? The person at the top had a red face, slightly waving his hand. This is still something that isn't confirmed, so what's the point of saying all this? However, if that day really comes, I won't forget all of you. Donglin being taken into the land of the king will definitely rely on the local scholars. I will try my best to fight for it in front of all the people. He smiled and said to the other middle-aged man in the corner, besides, how can my future be compared to Brother Wang Wei's? Being valued by the imperial court head, in the future I will have a meteoric rise. Ruling a province isn't a problem. That Wang Wei smiled proudly, holding his cup and not speaking. The people around him all congratulated him. Between his words, there was also a hint of regret. Sigh, we finally have a place to rise up. Under that stupid ruler, we are living like dogs. Luckily, Zhu Zi is smart to treat him as the enemy of the Confucians and instigate the emperor to suppress him. If not, who knows what would happen in the future. That stupid ruler deserves to die. Which one of the Deqian dynasty city lords didn't respect us? You deserve to be defeated today. Just as they spoke, their hearts moved as they all looked out of the building. He saw a vast golden light flying over from the distant horizon. It came from the west, from the direction of the central continent, landing towards Gantian Mountain City. This is the Golden Lubu Talisman? The Confucians present were all stunned as they looked at the shining golden talisman. The Golden Lubu Talisman was a type of message talisman. However, it didn't hide the information within. Any cultivator who saw it could use their spiritual sense to check it out. In ancient dynasties, each time there was a huge victory or a joyous matter, they would use this talisman to announce it to the world to let the people know. Does that stupid ruler want to play the Lubu talisman trick? With a joking tone, one of them mocked out. However, the expressions of the people around slowly turned cold. A few strands of spiritual sense probed upwards and touched the golden dew talisman. When they used their spiritual senses to sense it, their bodies all shook, their faces ashen white. Ruler personally led the imperial army to defeat 800,000 Taishang troops in the God-falling force. He killed the enemy south, conquering General Fein, and captured 20 grade 4 and above experts. Over 200,000 surrendered and many weapons and armor were obtained. Regretting that the Taishang emperor fled alone. What kind of joke is this? Yuting's body shook, using his hand to touch his forehead, and nearly fainted on the spot. How was that possible? Didn't they say that although the Jiuqi Palace had many troops, the three factions and the imperial army were confident in winning? Even if that Zhong Shou was lucky enough to escape, he could obtain large amounts of grain to support the south border battle. Why did they lose and wipe out all of them? Speaking of which, those 400,000 Dao soldiers were all gone? No. Taoist faction Purple Qilin Flame Spear Cavalry, Demon Sect Sky Demon War Cavalry, and Yuanshi Demon Spirit Cavalry. How strong were they? Even if they lost, they could still escape. It must be that Zhong Shou faked his victory to calm the people down. It must be that Zhong Shou faked his victory to calm the people down. This stupid ruler is about to die and still dares to play such a trick. Yuting didn't make a sound, but Wang Wei gritted his teeth and helped him say those words. The Taishang had 800,000 elites and 400,000 Dao soldiers, able to fight against 4 million enemies. How was it something he could swallow just because he wanted to? That's right. Isn't the news a little too exaggerated? Everyone exchanged glances with one another and laughed while shaking their heads. However, their expressions weren't as relaxed as before. In just a moment, there was a loud explosion outside the building and cheers rose up all around. The few people present all had cultivation. Although they were hundreds of feet away, they could still hear it. Our De Qian won. We really won. We wiped out the Taishang elites. Apart from 10,000 demon cavalry escaping, the 800,000 troops were wiped out. Ruler built the Jiuqi Palace not to enjoy but to lure the enemy. This time, we will wipe out all the Dao soldiers of Great Shang. I told you that ruler wouldn't be so dumb to such a level. Is it true or false? Looking at what was said in the document, it was hard to tell if it was true or false. It was a little mysterious. The news spread out from the country guarding duke. I heard that after the country guarding duke heard it, he laughed out loud. He took 10 jugs of wine and invited friends and family to get drunk. That's what the news from Duke Hao's mansion said too. Our De Qian has won and has entered the mid-plains. From today on, our De Qian will be the ruler of the cloud world. The news I got here came from the dojo of the Kenzo sect Han sect. Supposedly, the Dao temples of the various sword sects in the city have already posted notices that they want to open their doors and recruit disciples. That Songqingdao College is also prepared to recruit more students. Sentence after sentence spread into the ears of everyone, causing the atmosphere in the room to become more and more solemn. If it was only the De Qian who spread the news. It was just a one-man show. However, along with the Kenzo sect and Songqingdao exchanging glances with one another, the few Confucians saw that the faces of their opponents were ashen white, revealing a look of fear. Their hearts were also filled with shock. Could it be that the news of victory was real? Not only that. I heard that when the ruler defeated the enemy, there was a fire Qilin by his side, majestic energy charging into the heavens, dragon and phoenix roaring. Qilin by his side? Dragon and phoenix roaring? It seems like only the 3 ancient emperors in legends had that. The teachers in the Common Life College also said that. They said that it was the aura of a saint king. Monarch. He is the true living saint monarch. When he heard that, Yu Ting's expression relaxed. He shook his head. What a joke. What Qilin, saint ruler. Even if it is fake, it doesn't need to be so exaggerated. He saw that one of the people was holding a paper crane that had flown over who knows when. His face was alternating between green and white, blood seeping out from the corner of his lips. Yu Ting's brows furrowed, slightly curious. "Brother Li, why are you like that?" Only then did that princely raise his head. His eyes were like dead ashes as he swept the people seated. "It is a message talisman from my master." He had participated in the Forbidden Sky domain formation, so he had witnessed the battle with his own eyes. He said that the Dao soldiers of the three factions are all gone. The Taishang army is wiped out. The ruler has a Qilin by his side. His body has the Saint King white energy and is protected by heaven and earth. Not only is he not an incapable ruler, but he is also not an enemy of the Confucians. He is the Saint King of the world. Zhu Zi has made a huge mistake. He is a sinner of our Confucian faction. Their hearts nearly stopped beating. The few people in the room were all petrified. "Shut up, you dare to slander the saint." Those words were stuck in Yu Ting's throat, but he was unable to say it out. The master of the kid in front of him was just a slightly famous Confucian. What on earth gave him the courage to question the saints of the Middle Ages? Chapter 1091. At this moment, the Tonight Rain Pavilion was as silent as death. All of the Confucian scholars present were sitting there with blank and pale faces. They seemed to have lost their ability to react as they muttered to themselves. Those Confucians who only agreed and didn't say anything bad all had a look of relief in their eyes. Within Deqian, one couldn't use words to offend people. The words they said weren't enough to cause them to be convicted. At most, if people found out, it would be tough for them to enter the government. The few people who were cursing were completely disheartened. All of their energy and spirit had disappeared without a trace in this instant. On the contrary, those merchants and rich people were all pumped up and delighted. Jun Shang, he actually won, ruler ascended at 15 and expanded tens of thousands of miles in these 10 years. He also laid down a huge foundation in the outer region. Although he hates ruling the country, his military strategy is unparalleled. How can such a ruler be compared to Taishang's Emperor Yuanqin, who could only defend the city? How can he be the stupid ruler that the Confucians are talking about? Ha! What amusing is that those Confucians really thought that ruler built the Jiuqi Palace for fun. Ruler isn't some arrogant zhou. I couldn't stand it long ago. They are actually so rude. I really wish Jun Shang could capture them and cut them into 1,000 pieces. Their words didn't bother about the many Confucians in the pavilion as they mocked. However, the current situation had already flipped. If it was the latter, they would be furious but not dare to say anything, all of them feeling dejected. TSK. Luckily I locked my kid at home and didn't allow him to come out. This kid was tempted by the Confucians and actually believed Zhu Zi's words. Those Confucian colleges are really troublesome. Now that our Deqian has won, can we move into the mid-plains? Jiangnan is undefended, so we should be able to take it down, right? The 5 states of Jiangnan are famous for being rich. In the southern corner, Yang Ming and Wen Wei were looking at each other in a daze. Zhong Shi was also in a daze, totally distracted. Taishang losing was something unimaginable to him. The Mid-Plains Emperor dynasty was really strong, 10 times stronger than Gan. How could he be defeated so easily? However, looking at how everyone was speaking in unison, it seemed like it wasn't fake. 800,000 elites were all wiped out in front of the Jiuqi Palace, in the Godfall Plains? Looks like the world is really going to be in chaos. Yang Ming took a sip of wine and sighed. He expected that Yin Yu and the 3 sects would try to break the stalemate. He had also guessed that the Taishang might attack from the Jiuqi Palace. He had no choice but to enter the battlefield that China had chosen. However, he did not expect that the Taishang would lose so miserably. 800,000 men was only 1 out of 22 of the 18 million strong army. However, at this time, Taishang's spine had been completely broken by Zhong Shou. Although there were still tens of millions of troops north of Min River, they were already meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. They were powerless to reverse the situation. After losing these elite soldiers, the north of the Taishang would be in an even more dire situation. As for the country itself, it was going to be chaotic. It's not just this world that's in chaos. Wen Wei laughed bitterly and frowned. Although the world was in chaos, there would also be disputes within the Confucian sect. There were countless factions within the Confucian sect. In the past, the Confucian sect was the strongest. With Zhu Zi suppressing it, the side factions within the Confucian sect could only bow their heads and not say a word. However, after this huge change, who knew how many people would jump out and question St. Zhu Zi? Yang Ming, in your opinion, how trustworthy is it that the Deqian ruler is the reigning saint? He was most concerned about this matter. If Zhong Shou was really the ruler recognized by heaven and earth, then the current situation of the Confucian sect would be much worse. Zhong Shi also perked up his ears and was also curious about this matter. I don't know about this either. Yang Ming shook his head. After all, he had not seen it with his own eyes and did not know the real news. How could he be sure? However, if the Deqian ruler is really the saint, then he has the Qilin as his companion. Then, the Taoist sect's purple Qilin flame spear cavalry will definitely be wiped out. Oh! Wen Wei's eyes flashed and he understood what he meant. The Saint Beast Qilin King had the ability to counter the Xian Flame Golden Qilin beasts of the Confucian sect. The purple Qilin Flame Spear Cavalry was a top Dao soldier, but if they faced a true saint ruler, they wouldn't be able to fight back at all. It seemed like the defeat of the three factions was due to this. If not, why would they lose so badly? Most probably. Speaking of which, the Gone country ruler's actions are the true path of a benevolent king? He was recognized by the heavens and the Tao. How is that possible? It's so preposterous. Zhong Shi was in a daze. Today's matter had a huge impact on his ideals, and it could be said that it was toppling. He is the saint ruler. Yang Ming looked out of the window in a daze. As they say, a gentleman doesn't stand beside a collapsing wall. I am prepared to move my family over to Donglin. From what I see, the Taishang won't collapse in a short period of time. However, this time, Wen Wei wasn't surprised. The Deqian won and had become the overlord of the cloud world. The country was strong and the people were happy. On the contrary, the Taishang was in a precarious situation after this defeat. Even if they could maintain it, they wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Actually, when he heard the news of the Deqian victory, he had such a thought in his heart to temporarily move to Donglin to avoid the chaotic world. If possible, it is best to become an official in the Deqian. If we want to observe the economy of this country, it will be like looking at flowers in the fog, and we won't be able to understand it. Only after becoming an official and holding a certain amount of power can we understand the foundations. Zhong Shi was shocked and anxiously said, but that Taishang ruler personally said that he wants to burn books and destroy Confucianism to wipe out our Confucian faction. Yang Ming didn't reply, only exchanging glances with that Wen Wei and smiling. How would they not know that the Deqian ruler was only unhappy with the current Confucian teachings and Zhu Zi? They believed that in the Confucian faction, they weren't the only ones who saw through this matter. Zhong Shi still wanted to speak, but outside of the Jinyu pavilion, a heaven-shaking cheer spread out. The ruler has won. There are 5 decrees to spread to the world. Farmers don't need to pay taxes and instead will be subsidized? This is really a legend. Speaking of which, our Deqian taxes are really little. Instead, the 3 taxes take up 90%. It is okay to remove them. Set up retirement funds for the farmers and workers of the world, so that the people of Deqian can be taken care of and won't have to worry about 10,000 years of poverty? His Majesty is really a saint ruler. Demon-slaying decree? These demon path people really deserve to die. If my cultivation wasn't not enough and I was only grade 2, I would want to personally kill a few of them. Remove the 3 law divisions and set up a law department. They won't listen to the cabinet and will only be supervised by the meeting hall. From today on, the ruler will be under the law. If the ruler breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the people? I don't understand, how weird. The ruler is a rare saint ruler, so why is there a need to do this? Remove all physical punishment? Good, good, good. The ruler is really benevolent. However, why couldn't my nephew meet such a saint ruler earlier? He only took 3 rounds of money and cut off 3 fingers. Even if he regrets it now, his broken limbs can't be regrown. Banning all land transactions, the government will buy it and give it to the landless people? Is there a need? Farming now doesn't earn money. My family has long wanted to sell some of their land. Who knows how much the government will subsidize? A bright glow flashed in the eyes of Yang Ming and Wen Wei. With a flash, they were outside of the Jinyu Pavilion. The place where the notice was posted was not far away, 2,000 feet away on a green stone wall. At this moment, this place was filled with people. Who knows how many there were? Luckily, the 2 of them had the ability to float in the air. Their spiritual eyes could see 1,000 miles. Looking out from afar, they were able to see all the contents of the notice. Wen Wei instantly sucked in a cold breath. The moment this decree goes out, the hearts of the people will all belong to Deqian. If he can do that, then the ruler of Deqian is indeed the saint ruler of the world. Yang Ming looked around. The officials will take in grain and distribute land equally. This plan can be said to have offended the nobles of the world. What is weird is that looking at the situation here, these people actually have no intention to resist. Among the crowd, there were many rich people and even officials. However, some of them were filled with righteous indignation and dissatisfaction. Although some of them were unhappy, most of them were expressionless and didn't care much about it. It was obvious that Zhong Shou's decree didn't touch their sore spot. Was it related to the policy of focusing on commerce? Yang Ming was deep in thought. When one did business, one's income far exceeded that of farming, and one might even lose money. To these people, there was no need to keep the land in their hand. Actually, be it Donglin or South Wind Cloud Road, they were both vast and sparsely populated. There were still numerous pieces of land that could be developed. Zhong Shou's plan was most probably to prepare for entering the Central Cloud continent. First, he set the country policy. When he entered in the future, he would face resistance from the aristocratic families of the Central Plains. However, it was better than the country policy being held hostage by these aristocratic families in the future. His plans were far-reaching. He was becoming more and more curious about this Deqian ruler. Unfortunately, he wasn't famous enough and had no chance to meet him. Shaking his head, Yang Ming looked at the last decree. He heard an arrogant laugh in his ear. Is the king under the law? What Sun Zi wished for and what Hanzi wanted was personally realized by a Tsang Xingdao disciple. What would the 2 of them think if they knew about this? The descendant of Shi Zi, who advocates for equality in the world, is the saint ruler. Has the heavens really opened their eyes? That laughter reverberated for miles, attracting the attention of everyone here. Even Yang Ming and Wen Wei were also curious and turned their heads. They saw a middle-aged prince dressed like a scholar, but he didn't care about his appearance, walking into the distance. Gathering the scholars of the world to comment on the Confucian faction. Talking about the merits of the Confucian faction and their faults. Commenting on the Confucian faction. How vicious, but I like it. As expected from the Emperor of Xingming. He is much stronger than that Qin emperor. Yang Ming kept silent. Zhong Shou's decree was indeed vicious. He wanted to rip open the Confucian faction for everyone to see. Wen Wei frowned and wanted to walk up. However, Yang Ming reached out and stopped him. This person seems to be from the legalism faction, the line of Hanzi. Chapter 1092. That person won the Battle of Nanjiang in the end. Outside of Lingyun Palace, Chu Kuangren stood on the clouds with his hands behind his back. His eyes were dim as he looked at the stars in the sky. That battle that decided the life and death of the great Gan country and the rise and fall of the 6 factions was something that all the sects paid close attention to. They sent experts to monitor the situation in Nanjiang. This was why when the 60,000 purple Qilin flame spear cavalry were wiped out, Lingyun's sect had already received the news. It is actually a Qilin, a saint ruler. The shock in Yan Feibai's eyes still hadn't faded. He turned around and looked behind him. His face was filled with luck. Zhong Shou was labeled as the enemy of Confucianism by Zhu Zi and also had a blood feud with the Taoist faction. Everyone in the world could attack him. A few years ago, close to half of Lingyun's sect disciples died under the Blood Cloud cavalry. This enmity and hatred was something he could never forget. At that time, pretty much all the elders in the sect thought that they saw a chance. They wanted to move the entire sect to attack Donglin. However, they were suppressed by Zhu Renquang, who thought that Lingyun's sect had suffered heavy losses. What they needed most was to rest up and develop the next generation of disciples. They shouldn't rush to take revenge and join the wars of the world. Thus, emotions surged and thousands of disciples gathered in front of the palace to denounce the sect leader. They saw Zhu Renquang as the sinner of Lingyun's sect. However, at this moment, the disciples gathered in front of the palace had already scattered. Reality proved that Zhu Renquang's decision to stay away from right and wrong was correct. His persistence could be said to have saved the entire sect. They really didn't dare to imagine that if they joined in, Lingyun's sect would be surrounded and attacked by the Deqian cavalry. Senior Master, why are you worried? This time, Lingyun's sect was able to get out of this because of your decision. Although the elders didn't say it out loud, they were very grateful in their hearts. The disciples below are also very happy. Zhu Renquang came back to his senses and passed a talisman to Yan Feibai. This is Senior Master Wen Su's talisman for me to officially take charge of the entire sect. Yan Feibai's brows rose. This was a joyous matter. His senior master used to be really arrogant. However, since he became the sect leader, he became more and more stable. Later on, he would be impartial and deal with sect matters in a disciplined manner. Many people felt that Zhu Renquang was much stronger than Long Ruo, who was apologetic on the outside but arrogant on the inside and brought a calamity to the Lingyun school. Zhu Renquang said leisurely, "Apart from that, the ancestor told me to personally head to Donglin to express my loyalty." Finally, he would be able to set up a Dao Academy in Deqian and participate in foreign expeditions. He said that you are the saint of the present age, the only one in 10,000 years, and my Lingyun sect cannot be your enemy. Yan Feibai was stunned. Did Ancestral Master Wen Su mean that he was ready to completely give up on the hatred between him and Zhong Shou? In other words, those thousands of disciples had lost their lives in vain. He also understood that although Zhu Renquang had stopped the sect from falling into the abyss, he was still unwilling. However, he didn't feel anything in his heart. At this moment, the Lingyun sect no longer had the qualifications to seek revenge from the Deqian. If they didn't participate in the great undertaking of the Deqian saint, the sect would only weaken even more. Sooner or later, even Lingyun Palace would not be safe. Patriarch is wise. Yan Feibai's spiritual sense swept across the decree. Only on the side of the two Taoist ancestors? This time the Taoist ancestor called for the subordinate sects to provide Dao soldiers, but Lingyun's sect didn't participate. If they leaned towards Gantian Mountain, they would be cutting themselves off from the Taoist faction. Qing Xian and Tai Huang Taoist ancestor? Naturally, they will inform Lingyun vast habitat. Zhu Renquang laughed coldly and didn't care at all. They probably won't stop us. If not, in the 5 states of Jiangnan, what would happen to the 274 sects of our Taoist faction? Yan Feibai understood and then kept silent. De Qian was currently ruling the world. The 3,000 Taoist sects that lost the protection of Dao soldiers were all trembling under Zhong Shou's knife. Especially within De Qian territory, they needed to rely on the saint ruler. Even with the ability of the two Taoist ancestors, they couldn't order their sects to give up their foundations and be enemies with the De Qian. The situation in the world had changed and one couldn't help but feel heavy. With the strength of that person sweeping the southeast, it wasn't impossible for him to unify the cloud world. On the other side, Gu Hanyun's mood suddenly relaxed. With the Void Inquiry Talisman, it meant that the grievances between Lingyun's sect and Zhong Shou would be totally resolved. She didn't need to worry about being enemies with that person, although the distance between them was getting further and further. Thinking about it now, if I could refute senior brother and persuade him, he would be able to accept me. How good would it be if the sect accepted him? Now, I'm afraid, Zhu Renquang said with a melancholy expression. Then, he gave out a self-mocking laugh. It was already in the past, so what was the point of saying all this? At that time, his status was low, and even if he said it, he wouldn't be valued. He would just make things worse. At the same time, 3,200 miles away, a young Taoist's brows were tightly furrowed. Behind him were 12 identical swords that circled around his body. Saint King, he is actually a Saint King. Saint King, a saint ruler. He needed to rule and be flawless, compatible with the righteous path of heaven and earth. In other words, did my senior brothers, senior uncles, and senior brothers die for nothing? Did heaven and earth think that they can be killed? The young Taoist laughed out loud, his eyes filled with a maniacal and violent intent. Even if you are the saint ruler, I will still kill you first. As the sword stabbed down, countless cracks appeared on the floating island beneath him, causing it to crumble apart. As for the young Taoist, he waved his sleeve and picked up a stone tablet before stepping into the void. The Taoist's face was filled with determination. At most, in 3 years, he would be able to have a head-on battle with Zhong Shou. At night, within the imperial city, the atmosphere was really depressed and solemn. The entire city was filled with an aura of dust. The originally bustling brothels and taverns were now filled with sparrows at their entrances. There weren't many people on the street. Although there were hundreds of death energy lanterns hanging in front of the various aristocratic families' manors, it seemed really cold. At this moment, within the reading rooms of the various families, the atmosphere was really intense. They were either good friends or a few relatives gathered together to discuss the situation of the world. In terms of information gathering, the aristocratic families and officials of the imperial city were no weaker than those sections. At this moment, the entire city was in a frenzy because of the outcome of the god-falling plains. Everyone was trembling in fear. For the first time, they started to fear the East Country, the person they saw as a tyrant. The world is finished. It is totally finished. We lost the god-falling plains battle. 18 million troops are about to be wiped out. The fate of the Taishang country is at its end. How can that Zhong Shou be the saint ruler? Didn't they say that the Qilin was born from good energy? What a joke! What a joke! What a joke that Zhu Zi actually treated the saint ruler that the Confucian faction dreamt of for 10,000 years as the enemy of the Confucians. The 3 ancient emperors' prosperous era. Did the heavens think that the current De Qian country can be compared to the prosperous era of the cloud desolate era? The De Qian elites are all dead. Will the De Qian country chase and sweep the mid-plains? This is the calamity of our Confucian faction. Are the teachings of my Confucian sect wrong? Or is the heavenly path wrong? Damn! With our teachings, we were able to have so many prosperous eras in these 7,000 years. The past rulers all praised our ability to rule the world. If we knew that this would happen, we shouldn't have participated. I've been screwed over by that sage Zhu. Is that Jiuqi Palace a trap? That's true. How could such a mighty leader do such a stupid thing? Within the courtyards of many colleges, flames were burning. What was burning wasn't wood but the articles and books that scolded and insulted the Deqian country ruler. Since Zhu Zi announced to the world that he treated Zhong Shou as the enemy of the Confucians. In the world, numerous Confucians were writing articles to scold and spread them around. If there were any outstanding articles, they would fight to read them. There were even some who compiled them into books and sold them. All of a sudden, the price of Luoyang's paper was high. They stepped on Zhong Shou's reputation again and again. Numerous bad names, no matter if it was true or not, were added to Zhong Shou's head. However, at this moment everyone was in danger. They all avoided these books and books. If that Zhong Shou really ruled the world one day, then the articles and books he collected would be evidence of his crimes. Furthermore, no matter how people slandered him, as long as he had the aura of the saint ruler, those words were useless. The people of the world would naturally be able to tell. On the contrary, it made people laugh and solidified the reputation of the Confucian faction disciples being the best at spreading rumors. At this moment, the various aristocratic families were in a different situation. What they were worried about was also different. Damn. That ruler is useless and his army was wiped out. My family worked so hard and none of the 20,000 Dao soldiers survived. We shouldn't have participated at the start. What Saint Zhu Zi? He caused so much harm. The world is in chaos. It seems like we can't stay in the imperial city for long. We probably have to prepare for war in the land. Shiyue, is the Shi family starting to rise up? Shouldn't we get in touch with China? My family is weak and can't fight for the world. We can only choose experts to follow. That Zhong Shou is the saint ruler of this world. He is a hero that I can serve. Who knows where the so-called God Emperor is? In the jail of the Ministry of Justice, the current Jin Buhui lazily opened his eyes. Speaking of which, the Taishang lost badly? I don't have to dig out my eyes? As he said that, his eyes were filled with a teasing expression as he looked forward. The officials that he met at the city gates were pretty much all present. At this moment, their expressions were filled with fear. Especially the few who mocked him. They were extremely awkward, amongst which included the Yang family disciple from before. Don't worry, it won't be long. The Deqian won't be able to attack the imperial city. The teen surnamed Yang smiled bitterly. Naturally, he knew that. However, the problem was that the Yang family's land and foundations were mostly in Jiangnan. The 5 states were destined to fall into the hands of the Deqian. If that ruler knew that his sworn brother faced such a situation and was humiliated by him, he would definitely take revenge. If he took revenge, then what would he do in the family? He was not the only one. Most of the officials here had family businesses in Jiangnan. Jin Buhui was still laughing coldly. However, his heart was really dark and he felt a chill in his chest. His sworn brother still won in the end. However, the Taishang lost so badly. They lost so badly that they had no chance to turn things around. Chapter 1093. After using a full 10 minutes, Jin Buhui finally sent away the group of people in front of him. Only after the prison cell regained its silence did he let out a long sigh. At this moment, he didn't know what he was feeling. Mourning the fall of the Taishang? He was delighted, mocking that Yuanshan emperor for not listening to his advice. He also hated those people. As subjects of the Taishang, the country still existed, but they all had such thoughts. If not, why would they fear him and rush over to apologize? That Yang family said that they wanted to save you out of the city. Why didn't they agree? A figure suddenly appeared beside Jin Buhui. It was precisely Su Chen. Although the Yang family is the weakest of the 5 big families, they have many experts. If they wanted to save you, they would have a 90% chance. You just want to send me, Jin Buhui, to the south to curry favor in front of my brother. How can I let them do as they wish? This isn't the way to be friends. Jean Buhue scoffed coldly. His expression was solemn and solemn. Tell me the truth, what is the current Taishang like? What is the situation within the imperial city? What else can they do? All the aristocratic families have sent their disciples back to their land. At most, there are 3 to 5 people left in the city. The various academies of the Confucian faction were in an uproar. Although the local officials haven't reached the level of colluding with the Deqian, they were forced back by the 5 imperial decrees. However, if the Taishang continues to fall, it will be just a matter of time. Suchen gave out a mocking smile. However, I heard that Shiyue has acted and the Shi family has planned to block the 100 Victory Pass. This Taishang won't fall in a short time. 5 imperial decrees? Jean Buhue shook his head. No matter what the contents of the 5 imperial decrees of Zhong Shou were, he didn't care. All of this had nothing to do with him. He only felt emotional and his expression was pained. If I knew that the Taishang would lose so badly, I should have left with you. Now, I can't even leave even if I wanted to. Suchen kept silent and looked into the distance. His spiritual sense sensed that there were dozens of God realm experts locking down this place. Although he was not afraid, there was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. Although Taishang was on the verge of collapse, it still had a lot of resources. With these people around, it was impossible for him to rescue them. Jean Buhue was really open about his own life. It's useless to regret now. Looking at your words, it seems like the Kenzo sect has already decided to advance and retreat together with the Deqian. His Majesty is the Holy Lord. Now that they are dominating the cloud world, our Kenzo sect will naturally follow behind them and assist the Deqian Empire. Even your sect, the Haoshuan sect, is tempted? Su Chern raised his sword-like eyebrows, revealing a cold determination. Even if it's not the Emperor of the prophecy, with His Majesty's character, the Kenzo sect can rest assured. Your Majesty? He is prepared to become an emperor? Jean Buhue was stunned once more, following which he mocked himself. With his achievements, the Deqian country could have become an emperor long ago. Forget it, Brother Su, please tell that righteous emperor. Say that even if I die, I won't make things difficult for him. Also, be careful of the Confucian faction, be careful of Zhu Zi. Suchen's heart jumped, instinctively ignoring the previous sentence, continuing to mock. Confucian faction? Zhu Zi. The Confucian faction can set the spring and autumn seasons, the rulers Saint King Aura and the Deqian dynasty's prosperity. However, it isn't something that they can deny just because they want to. I want to see how the billions of Confucians in the world will react. Will they continue to listen to that Zhu Zi? The Jiuqi Palace in the middle of the night regained its silence. All the war matters ended before noon. After ending it hastily, Kong Yao brought half of the Tai elite troops and Dao soldiers to rush to Min River. North of Min River, there were still 10 million Taishang troops. If the Deqian dynasty wanted to take down the 5 states in the south, they definitely couldn't allow the Zhongyuan border army elites to escape back to the north of Honglian mountain range. As they say, speed was the most important thing in war, which was why they couldn't waste any time. On the contrary, Zhong Shou was temporarily free. The 100,000 cavalry he needed could only be gathered after wiping out the 16 million Shang troops in the north. He wasn't in a rush. At this moment, he was in the main hall, deep in thought as he looked at a jade letter in his hand. This was one of the items that Zhongshuan left behind. As the Taishang Grand Teacher, he was naturally really rich, far from what other cultivators of the same grade could compare to. However, it was a pity that this person did not bring many worldly possessions with him this time. Out of the few items he left behind, only this jade letter made Zhong Shou curious. What was recorded in the jade letter was a 3D map. The reason why he noticed it was because what was recorded in the map was similar to the Qin Emperor sub-tomb that he had visited before. However, the area was much larger, a difference of 10 times. Apart from the main tomb within which the sky was round and the earth was round, it was like a complete world. Outside there were numerous paths and mazes. It was covered in formations and mechanisms like a forest. Even the jade letter in his hand couldn't explain everything in detail. There were many places that were unclear. Qin Emperor main tomb? Zhong Shou's eyes squinted. Then, he looked at a white-faced, handsome-looking man in front of him. This was the Taishang Emperor Yuanshan's favorite eunuch, junior supervisor Gao Ru. Yin was alone and was saved by Shiyue. Those officials who accompanied him weren't so lucky and were all captured. This Gao Ruo was one of them. Does that Zhongshuan Grand Teacher know where the tomb is? Gao Ruo's face was ashen white. He bit his lips and didn't say a word. His eyes were cold and decisive as he looked up without any fear. You are really loyal. Zhong Shou wasn't surprised. Since Yin Yu was praised as the ruler of Deqian's revival, naturally, he had enough ability to rule. If he couldn't obtain the loyalty of his trusted officials, then he wouldn't have been able to turn the tides. No matter how he tortured this person, he probably wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. Unless he directly searched his soul, then he would be able to find that portion of memories regarding the tomb. However, when he asked that question, he wasn't prepared to find out anything from Gao Ruo's mouth. He just needed to know that Emperor Yuanshan and Zhongshuan were planning something. Holding the jade letter in his hand, Zhong Shou thought about it for a moment. Then, he saw that Zhang Huai was a little distracted. He had an idea. Minister Zhang, I know that you are the descendant of Zhang Liang from the end of Qin to the start of Han. What do you know about the Qin Emperor tomb? Zhang Huai's expression turned serious when he heard this, and then he laughed helplessly. What he was thinking about had nothing to do with the Qin Emperor tomb. Instead, he was thinking about how to persuade Zhong Shou to change his emperor title. In the afternoon, hundreds of thousands of soldiers tried to persuade him, but Zhong Shou rejected them. In the end, they didn't succeed, and that made him really annoyed. However, he did know a little about the tomb. The problem was, how did the ruler know that he was the descendant of Zhang Liang? The Qin Emperor always claimed to be the top emperor in the cloud world. How could a mortal tomb be to his liking? People don't know where the main tomb is, but one of Zhang Huai's ancestors did. He said that the main tomb was at East Kunlun Mountain. East Kunlun? Zhong Shou's brow rose up and he thought to himself that it was possible. West Kunlun Mountain was the top giant mountain before the Cloud Desolate era. However, at the end of the Cloud Desolate era, it was broken by one palm. In the future, the central cloud continent was heavily damaged and the terrain changed. Who knows where it is now? With the arrogance of the Qin Emperor, only the legendary unparalleled land could bury his dragon body. Speaking of which, the Qin Emperor tomb might be beneath the cloud continent within the abyss? When the cloud continent split up, many pieces of land sank into the cloud ocean. With the various books that Zhong Shou read, the land that East Kunlun was at might have already sunk. That was a little tough. Even if he knew that it was East Kunlun, he didn't know the exact location. He couldn't help but curse out those ancient experts. They really didn't know how to be human. A good cloud continent was shattered just like that. However, the collapse of the cloud continent started 10,000 years ago and ended 8,000 years ago after a huge change in heaven and earth. It seemed to have something to do with the battle where Shizi fell. As for the exact location, Zhang Huai doesn't know. However, it shouldn't be a problem. Someone told me that the Qin Emperor tomb will appear 12 years later. When he said that, Zhang Huai had an idea and his eyes were filled with solemnity. I heard that although Zhongshuan came from the Taoist faction, he was still an expert. However, he obtained a portion of the legacy of the ancient Qi cultivators. The spiritual formations and mechanisms in the tomb were completed by the Mahist faction blacksmiths and Qi cultivators. It is hard to say whether or not this person can enter the tomb early. If that was the case, then it would be a little problematic. That year, Great Qin collected God metal to craft the 12 copper men. Each of them had the strength to go up against peak Saint Realm experts. It was said that their bodies were so strong that even End Realm experts couldn't break them. When the 12 copper men worked together to form a formation, they could go up against End Realm experts. This was why the Qin emperor was able to suppress the 3 factions despite being their emperor. If such a treasure fell into the hands of the Taishang, it would allow the Taishang to rise up once more. No matter whether or not Zhongshuan's letter was real or fake, De Qian couldn't take the risk. Without hesitation, Zhang Huai tossed out a talisman. The talisman burned without a flame. Zhang Huai's expression became uglier and uglier. Before Zhong Shou asked, Zhang Huai opened his mouth. That Taishang Grand Teacher is most probably not dead. The methods of Qi cultivators are really amazing. Zhong Shou was shocked. Zhongshuan suffered from the recoil of the heaven path and had his body smashed by the Qilin. He actually didn't die? Was it an incarnation of his body? It didn't look like it. However, there was no need to doubt about this matter, and he could just ask Gao Ruo directly. This matter might have something to do with your majesty. However, I just need to investigate and I will know the details. If you want to keep your life, then you shouldn't hide it from me. Gao Ruo hesitated for a moment. Zhong Shou acted like he wanted to grab him and search his soul. He could only anxiously open his mouth. I don't know whether or not he is still alive. However, I heard that he cultivated an 8-9 soul training soul splitting technique that can split his soul and create dozens of incarnations. Chapter 1094. I don't know whether or not he is still around. However, I heard that Grand Teacher cultivated an 8-9 soul training soul splitting technique that could split the soul into dozens. 8-9 soul training soul splitting technique? Zhong Shou felt that it was a little familiar and searched his memories. In just a moment, he gained some information. Song Xingdao's books had records of this technique. It was extremely evil and could split the soul into numerous parts or even dozens of parts. Each part was an individual with an individual personality. However, they were all connected to one another. The current Zhongshuan, to a certain extent, wasn't Zhongshuan anymore. However, he was able to inherit the latter's memories. This evil technique was one of the inheritances of the Qi cultivators. It was even weirder than the demon path. There were even many examples of people killing one another after splitting the soul. Legend had it that when this technique reached its peak, one could split 72 souls. Of course, the result of splitting the soul was that one would lose the chance to enter the Saint Realm and End Realm. Therefore, even among those Qi refinement warriors, very few of them would cultivate it. Even if they did, at most, they would split 1 or 2 souls. Speaking of which, this Zhongshuan might really be alive. Who knows whether or not this soul would be affected by the backlash of the heavens. Speaking of which, this Taishang Grand Teacher not only obtained the legacy of the Qi cultivators. Moreover, it is most likely that he has obtained the orthodoxy of an ancient expert. Zhang Huai's brows were tightly furrowed. I originally thought that this person was just a normal divination master. Now it seems like he isn't simple. This person is helping the Taishang, so he is probably planning something big. The ancient Qi refinement warriors believed that everything had Qi and could be used. Righteous energy, king path energy, god path energy, killing energy, life energy, death energy. They could all be used and could be used to cultivate. This was why the lifespan of Qi cultivators was much longer than normal cultivators. However, there were different between good and evil. There were maniacs who killed and there were also righteous people. This was why Qi cultivators were just a general term and didn't form a sect. Speaking of Qi cultivators, I have to mention one person. Back then, in order to find immortality, the Qin Emperor sent Su Fu to the outer region with 3,000 children to find the Penglai world and seek the medicine of immortality. When Zhang Huai said this, he seemed to be deep in thought. Before the Qin dynasty was destroyed, Qi refinement warriors were on the verge of extinction. All the great cultivators above the sage level died. However, this person was the only one who managed to survive far away from the cloud world. This person was someone who could suppress longing by half a notch back then. If he didn't die, he would be an end-realm saint venerable now. Su Fu? Zhong Shou knew this person. Back in the day, Qin Shi Huang had been searching everywhere for a way to achieve immortality, capturing cultivators and asking for medicinal pills and cultivation method. The disciples of Taoism and Song Xingdao all had their own sects, so they were not afraid of the Qin Emperor. Those rogue cultivators suffered a calamity. Most of the Qi refinement warriors lived alone. They couldn't fight against the Qin army, the countless experts, and the 12 bronze men. Those who knew better all fled the cloud world, not daring to return. However, there were many who were captured by Qin. Among the Qi refinement warriors, a few core figures who were successful in their cultivation were not spared. After Qin was wiped out, the spiritual wave in the cloud world weakened. The various sects fought for resources more and more intensely. It became harder and harder for rogue cultivators to survive, causing the Qi refinement warriors to be wiped out. At that time, among the few peak Saint Realm Qi refinement warriors, only this Su Fu dug out an ancient legend. It was said that there was a Penglai world in the outer region and there was an undying god medicine. Although it couldn't allow one to live forever, it could extend one's lifespan by 10,000 years. The second end realm Saint Venerable Qi Songzi used this medicine to form his Tao. The Qin Emperor believed it, and the Qi Songzi matter was recorded in the historical record. Just as he said, he sent 3,000 children to follow them and a few Saint Realm experts under his command to follow and monitor them. However, after Su Fu left, he didn't return. Even those kids and Saint Realm cultivators were nowhere to be seen. It was said that this person was multi-talented and had great cultivation talents. Before Longing, he was already famous. He focused on the Tao and was someone who was better than Kunming and Wei Su. If he didn't die, he would really be End Realm. Was this the 12th End Realm in the Cloud World? Within this region, there were roughly 50 famous End Realm Saint Venerables that people were familiar with. However, there were many who hid their names and no one knew about them. Also, what Zhang Huai said was that Zhongshuan might have obtained Su Fu's legacy. Although the Qi refinement warriors disappeared from the Cloud World, they weren't wiped out. Ruler, you still need to be careful in the future. However, our Deqian faction is tolerant of the various factions and isn't as xenophobic as the Confucian faction and Taoist faction. The chances of us recruiting them are higher than our opponents. Zhang Huai smiled like he didn't have such worries anymore. Also, there is the Qin Emperor tomb. Zhang Huai came from the Ghost Valley Zhonghu technique. Actually, he didn't know much about the Qin Emperor tomb. He wasn't even sure if the 12 copper men were in the tomb or not. If your majesty wants to know the details, the only way is to find 1 or 2 Mahists and Qi refinement warriors. A bright glow flashed in Zhong Shou's eyes. He had never come into contact with Qi refinement warriors. Only Kong Rui, who used the luck of the Deqian country to cultivate, had some connections with them. However, in terms of the Mahist's legacy, he did have one in his country. At this moment, this person was most probably in the celestial world, helping him craft the sword billets for his second soul as well as Yi Xian's sword artifact. Who knows if it was completed? He was really looking forward to that thread of Xiantian purple Qinxian metal energy. This person was most probably a core disciple of the Mahists, so how much did he know about the tomb? Without hesitation, Zhong Shou took out a purple gold talisman and activated it with his spiritual sense. The message talisman turned into a crane and flew into the void. The Copper Men and Qin Emperor tomb matter was too huge. If he was not careful, he could cause the situation that he fought so hard for to go down the drain. This was why Zhong Shou was willing to delay his trip to the Liu family Saint dynasty. He had to deal with this matter properly. However, the celestial world was really far away. By the time this talisman was able to resist, almost 10 days had passed. It would take 20 days to go back and forth. During this period of time, he could use it to wipe out the demon sect. Subei Governor Manor, within the main hall of the third area of the manor. At this moment, Yuanshan Emperor Yin Yu was sitting on the main seat in the hall. He looked really weak. His eyes were lifeless and incomparably dim. Since he ascended at 16, he removed officials, went against the outside world, and suppressed aristocratic families. It wasn't that he didn't face any setbacks, but he was always able to maintain a strong fighting spirit and was never truly defeated by anyone. No matter how badly he lost, he would be able to rise up. However, this time, the defeat at the Fallen God Plane had completely destroyed his self-confidence and willpower. 800,000 elites had been completely annihilated in the southern border. The remaining 10 million troops were basically at the mercy of others. As the emperor of the Taishang, he was clearer than others that the foundations of the Taishang were on the verge of collapse and were not far away. Saint Lord, how could that brat possibly be the Saint Lord? He muttered. Yin Yu was a little hysterical. Even if those 800,000 elite troops were wiped out, it couldn't be compared to that time when he looked at Zhong Shou with a Qilin beside him, King energy surging up, and the dragon and phoenix clashing. Endless regret surged up in his chest and was gnawing at his heart. Maybe he shouldn't have staked everything and sent all his troops to the south. He shouldn't have been so confident to choose the final battle at God-Falling Plains. He instinctively thought back to Shuriwei and Jin Buhui's 2 letters. Everything was really as the two of them said. Your Majesty. Yin Yu was jolted awake from his self-pity. When he raised his head, he saw a youth with a majestic figure and a confident expression striding into the spacious hall. On the left and right, there were only a few maidservants of the Governor Manor. Yin Yu instinctively thought back to Zhongshuan as well as the officials that he had no choice but to abandon. The sadness in his heart grew. Was the fate of the Taishang really over? Your Majesty, roughly 4 hours ago, Kong Yao has already broken through Min River. Zhong Yuan's 200,000 cavalry directly charged into the Honglian mountain range. At this moment, the East suppressing general, East stabilizing general, and the troops under Wanyan Xiongxing have surrendered. Yin Yu's eyes were stunned and he nearly couldn't react. Moments later, his pupils constricted as he realized that close to 3 million people had surrendered. In the Taishang system, titled generals were only below great generals and were grade 2. They were on the same level as the governor and could lead 1 million troops. 2 titled generals surrendered, which meant that 2 million troops had given up on resisting and were captured by the Gan army. Wanyan Xiongxing was one of his most trusted generals and came from a vassal race. At this moment, although he was only the chief commander, he was given a huge responsibility. He had 700,000 troops under him to defend the Honglian mountain range and protect the retreat path of the Shang army. Who knows what Kong Yao did to cause this person to actually surrender? Moreover, he did it so cleanly without even fighting a single battle. Rage rose up in his chest and his vital energy surged. Yin Yu only felt a sweetness in his mouth. A liquid with the taste of blood charged out of his throat. However, he forcefully swallowed it back down. It was still okay if it was others, but this Wanyan Xiongxing surrendered. The chances of the South Border Army returning from the Honglian mountain range to their country were extremely small and close to impossible. The grain path was already totally cut off, and they could only rely on the space artifacts of the Taoist faction and Confucian faction. However, at this moment, the Taoist faction, Confucian faction, and Demon faction had no time to worry about it. Transporting grain to the south would also risk being hunted down by the Deqian expert. More importantly, how much grain could the Taishang treasury have? In the past, with him suppressing them, those people didn't dare to be arrogant. However, now that the Taishang was showing signs of weakening, how much use could his orders be? Was Jiangnan really going to be lost? Send orders to the Jiangnan Navy provincial governor to lock down the various rivers and river systems of Jiangnan. Jiangnan states to try their best to move the treasuries north. If the grain can't be transported, then burn it. Thinking about it for a moment, Yin hesitated. Send orders to the Liao king to make him the crown prince since he entered the capital. When Shuriwa heard that, his eyes lit up. He was truly a mighty ruler. Even when he was in low spirits, his plans were all on point. At this moment, the Taishang couldn't take the internal strife. At such a time when everyone was in a panic, it was indeed the best idea to settle down early. There's also the 100 Victory Pass. Yin Yu's eyes were dark and cold. If they couldn't defend this southern pass, then the Taishang would really die. Chapter 1095. That 100 Victory Pass depends on you too. Don't let me down. The safety of the mid-plains depends on this pass. Shuyue's brows rose up when he heard that. He looked at Emperor Yuanshan and saw that there was no expression on his face before he lowered his head. Of course. Father has been in the army for many years and knows the troops well. Deqian doesn't have many troops, and we have 1 million at Victory Pass. It wouldn't be difficult for us to defend the pass. On the other hand, Father sent a fake decree and forcefully summoned troops, breaking the country laws. After this, my father will ask for your forgiveness. Emperor Yuanshan listened on quietly, smiling as he looked at the teen in front of him. Speaking of which, this kid was similar to Zhongshou. His talents were top of the current generation. Not only was his martial path no weaker than Zhongshou, but his achievements in the outer region were also similar. This time, he personally saved Yin Yu from Zhongshou. However, no one knew what his goal was. Was he really that loyal? Or was he not willing for the Taishang to fall and for the mid-plains to fall into the hands of Deqian? Or did he want to use his talents to command the princes? It was all unknown. There was also that Shi Qianli. With one fake decree, he pretty much used up all the troops in Jiangnan. How audacious! If it was in the past, he would have directly chopped off Shi Qianli's head. He would have used this chance to take over all the land of the Shi family and kill the entire family. However, at this moment, not only could he not punish him, but he had to console him. It was because Shi Qianli blocked 100 Victory Pass that he gave the Taishang some life and some hope. Moreover, Shuriwe even saved his life. However, that Shi family head who usually followed the rules and didn't dare to do anything out of line actually dared to do such a thing. He probably knew that the current Taishang wouldn't be able to punish him and could only rely on him. This person and this family all deserve to be killed. What crime are you guilty of? This time it is all thanks to your father that the Taishang can be saved. Your father's decree is in the archives of the Inner Palace Rights Department. It isn't a fake decree. Yin Yu waved his hand as if he didn't care. Right now, your father is responsible for the safety of the Southeast. It's better to have a proper reason. Pass down the edict on my behalf. Shi Qianli was loyal to the country and was good at military affairs. He was qualified to take on big responsibilities. He could become the great General Zhenan, the military governor of Gannan, Gangxi, and the other 7 prefectures. Stationed at the 100 Victory Pass, Envoy Jijia, Mansion Wrights Tong, 3 divisions. As for you, Shiqing, stay by Zhen's side. Right now, Zhen really lacks people. On the way back to the capital, I will need someone to accompany me. Shi Yu was shocked once again. He was extremely astonished. Envoys could execute officials below the third rank without the consent of the emperor. On the other hand, the opening ceremony and the three divisions allowed the opening ceremony to appoint officials. The combination of the two was equivalent to a small imperial court, which was why it was not easily given to an outsider. He had never thought that Yin would be so generous. He handed over the military power of the Seven State. Once he decided to rope him in, he wouldn't be so petty and didn't hesitate to give him so much power, as expected from a mighty ruler. However, he could roughly sense the suspicion and jealousy in Emperor Yuanshan's words. The last sentence was filled with obvious probing. However, he had no choice. He could only use such a method to persuade his father to take the risk. Only this method could protect the Taishang. At that time, he wouldn't have time to worry about how Emperor Yuanshan would feel about it. He was really magnanimous. As a subject of the Taishang, he just had to try his best. Even if the emperor was suspicious, as long as he had a clear conscience, it was okay. However, he wasn't someone who didn't care about life and death. If he really had no other choice, then it wouldn't be difficult for him to raise the flag and rebel. "Thank you, Your Majesty. With Sure Yu around, no one would disturb His Majesty. However, Your Majesty, please rush the guards and internal court guards over. With only Sure Yu here, it is hard to miss out." After bowing, Sure Yu got up. He saw that at this moment, Yin seemed to have aged 10 years. Numerous wrinkles appeared on his face. He looked really tired and lethargic. Sure Yu frowned. He wanted to say something but stopped. He thought about how the Taishang wasn't the only one who suffered heavy losses. The losses of the various families and vassal towns weren't below that of the Taishang. At this moment, most of these people didn't want the Taishang to cause chaos at this moment. It seemed like it was in a precarious situation, but if everything was handled well, it would be a rare chance for the Taishang to work together. However, for him to say such words, it was a little overboard. Just as he was hesitating, he saw Yin wave his hand. He had a dispirited and exhausted expression. Sure Yu also knew that Yin's current situation wasn't good, so he could only back out of the main hall. Actually, he also had numerous matters to deal with. For example, the grain of the 700,000 troops in South Wind Cloud Continent. Also, how should he deal with the spaceships and troops parked in the outer region? He really didn't have much time to spend on this Yuanshan emperor. After Sure Yu left, Yin's expression was still dark and dead. Only a relaxed expression flashed across the depths of his eyes. Hearing the words of this kid, it seemed like he really didn't have any intentions of using the emperor to command the vassals. He was really loyal. Although his safety was guaranteed, once he thought about how the 18 million troops of the Taishang died in the south, he felt totally disheartened. Only despair was left in his heart. He couldn't raise any fighting spirit. Looking at the side, Yin only felt really lonely. In the past, if he had any problems, he could gather his subordinates to discuss. However, at this moment, he was truly alone. There was no one he could rely on and no one could solve his problems. If Grand Teacher Zhongshuan was still here, if Gao Ruowei fell into the hands of the Gan army, just as he was thinking about this, he heard a familiar voice spread in from outside the door. "Your Majesty, why are you so dejected? Your spirits are all gone, this isn't like you." This voice? Yin was stunned and looked outside the hall, only to see a Taoist smiling and standing at the door. That voice and smile were no different from the dead Zhongshuan, however. He was only 20 years old. "Grand Teacher? You didn't die?" After Yin exclaimed, he came back to his senses. It really is the 8-9 soul training soul splitting technique? The expression in his eyes was filled with shock and doubt. He also knew about the ability of this Qi cultivator. However, the soul that was split out from this technique didn't have a master or a subordinate. The dead Zhongshuan was loyal to him, but the person in front of him might not be the same. Like he saw through Yin's thoughts, Zhongshuan walked in while explaining flatly, Your Majesty, don't worry. Although this Zhongshuan isn't the same Zhongshuan, he is also deeply connected to the fate of the Taishang country. Even if it is for myself, I will go all out to help your Majesty. Yin Yu shook his head. Thinking about it, the current Taishang and him had nothing worth scheming about. Zhongshuan's words did have some credibility. However, I still don't understand. At this moment, the fate of the Taishang country has declined. Even in my eyes, it will at most last 10 to 20 years. Regardless of whether you were a Taoist arcane master or a qi cultivator, you should all stay away from the Shang dynasty. Even if you leave me, I won't blame you. So why? The fate of the country has declined? Your Majesty is actually in such despair? Zhongshuan smiled indiscernibly and didn't think much of it. However, in my eyes, it is far from the time to conclude. After the battle on God-falling plains, Zhong Shou sent out 5 decrees to inform the world. Has your Majesty seen them? While speaking, Zhongshuan placed a scroll in front of Yin Yu. 5 decrees? Yin Yu's heart moved. He was now alone in the Subei Governor Manor and news was indeed blocked. Shuriwei ordered people to gather all the news to him. However, he was totally disheartened and didn't have the heart to look at it. He reached out and took it. After reading it, Yin Yu's brows frowned. What kind of nonsense is this? Subsidizing farmers? Did this Deqian feel that taxes were too much? Since he took over, the Taishang dynasty had a surplus. However, they didn't dare to spend it recklessly. They stored it in the treasury to prepare for disaster years or when they needed to move troops. Looking at how Zhong Shou ruled, he was afraid that the money in the treasury wouldn't be spent. Was he trying to win over the hearts of the people? If a celestial realm cultivator in the cloud world was willing, he could also slaughter tens of millions of people within a year. How much strength did those small farmers and ants have? As for the last few, he finally understood. Officials collecting grain as one? Splitting the land? This Zhong Shou is too arrogant. A bright glow flashed across Yin Yu's eyes. Others didn't know. Those 5 aristocratic families definitely wouldn't agree. Gather all the scholars in the world to comment on the Confucian faction. Talk about the merits of the Confucian faction and their mistakes. Criticize the Confucian faction? Does this Zhong Shou want to force Saint Zhuzi into despair? Just these 2 decrees temporarily cut off the possibility of Zhong Shou invading the mid-plains in a short time. It caused the aristocratic families in the mid-plains to be at odds with each other and also cut off any hope of reconciliation with Confucian faction Zhuzi. His heart shook slightly. Yin Yu's mind recovered a little. However, he shook his head and the flames in his eyes dissipated. It's useless. Although that Zhong Shou is young and arrogant, after winning he became arrogant and made such a move. However, to the Taishang it doesn't have any benefit. At this moment, the Taishang was just struggling at death's door. They had Zhong Shou, this fierce enemy. The aristocratic families could still work together to defend against him. However, once the aristocratic families recovered their strength, then, the various vassal towns would fight one another and the world would be in chaos. At this moment, who would bother about the Taishang imperial court? Zhongshuan's lips curled up. Your Majesty, do you remember the Qin Emperor tomb matter? If we can get the 12 copper men to protect the fate of the country, not only will the Taishang be able to keep peace, but it won't be difficult to counterattack the Deqian. Yin Yu suddenly stood up. His face was dark and uncertain. Zhongshuan's face was filled with an evil smile. I believe that part of my soul also told you. To open the door of the tomb, it requires the blood of 10,800 children born at dawn, or the blood sacrifice of 1,200,000 men. Yin Yu looked absent-minded and hesitant. My part of my soul has died and the tomb map in his hands has definitely fallen into the hands of the Deqian ruler. Your Majesty, you don't have much time to hesitate. As Zhongshuan said this, he suddenly paused. Seeing Yin look over, he smiled. That Zhong Shou has led 100,000 cavalry up to the 6th spiritual house Demon Spirit Mountain. This saint ruler really isn't willing to take a loss. The demon sect is in trouble. Chapter 1096. South Border. Within Demon Spirit Valley, numerous spiritual lights exploded and thunder rumbled. This place was 6 out of the 19 spiritual houses, and was pretty much drowned by the spells that struck from all directions. The protective formation within the valley was already at full power. However, it was still unable to perfectly protect this valley. The surrounding mountain peaks were collapsing piece by piece. At this moment, above, 2 Big Dipper Imperial Demon slaying sword formations were operating. 72 Source Ocean Demon slaying warriors were looking down coldly. On the ground, there were tens of thousands of spirit masters. Inu led 800,000 elite troops to sneak attack Juchi Palace. Amongst them, there were 30,000 spirit masters. Apart from the Taoist and demon faction Dao soldiers, the other spirit masters were all captured. At this moment, whether they were willing or not, they were all using spells to strike the valley. They didn't care about the consumption of mind stones and pills, crazily gathering spiritual energy and then releasing it out. A portion of them were intimidated by the Saint King aura that Zhong Shou showed and decided to join him. The other portion had knives placed on their neck. However, at this moment, they didn't dare to be careless. Along with the spirit masters that De Qian had, there were a total of 40,000. 40,000 spirit masters working together. The vast spiritual energy they gathered had already drowned the entire valley. Even if a saint realm attacked, they wouldn't be able to take it head-on. Half a day had passed since they first attacked. The protective formation of the spiritual house finally couldn't take it anymore and cracks appeared. Zhong Shou stood at the peak of the mountain and thought back to mysterious cloud spirit sect. The 3rd spiritual house's protective formation was undoubtedly stronger than demon spirit sects. However, under the suppression of the 3,000 blood cloud cavalry, he was able to forcefully break it. At this moment, Demon Spirit Sect was still able to hold on for half a day under the attacks of 40,000 spirit masters. As expected, after the spiritual wave started to get stronger, the formation also became stronger. It seems like it can't hold on anymore. Hu Zhongyuan laughed, holding the Tiger King knife in his hand. Then, he used his tongue to lick the dark brown blood patterns on the knife, his eyes filled with excitement and cruelty. As long as the defensive formation was completely destroyed, the 100,000 cavalrymen outside would be able to charge in and kill all the living beings and enjoy the pleasure of killing. Perhaps because he was too excited, a pure black iron tiger even appeared behind Hu Zhongyuan. Its eyes were also incomparably fierce. How disgusting! Chu Shui hugged the blood moon saber and turned his head away. He thought to himself that although this uncle of his was a loathsome hedonistic disciple in the past, he wasn't like today. He simply didn't know what to say. Zhong Shou was also speechless. Where did this Hu Zhongyuan learn this bad habit? Was it cool to lick a knife with your tongue? It's very dirty. Be careful not to get sick. This guy's saber had been stained with the blood of countless people in the past few days. At this time, it was unknown how many viruses that were discovered by later generations were on it. However, as a cultivator, there was nothing to fear. Hu Zhongyuan was slightly embarrassed. He hurriedly wiped off the saliva on his saber with his sleeve and looked in the direction of the valley with a serious expression. Zhong Shou laughed coldly as he looked into the sky. Those few end-realm spiritual senses were still suppressing his body. But so what? He could only look on as he wiped out the demon spirit sect. The blood-red light in the distance suddenly flashed. Zhong Shou's pupils instantly opened wide. However, before he even gave orders, the demon-slaying sword formation on the two Source Ocean Big Dipper platforms had already been activated. Two streaks of slaying sword energy slashed down and instantly tore open a giant hole in the defensive spiritual formation. 100,000 feet of sword energy surged in and instantly swept across, slashing out a giant sword mark within the valley. The foundations of the defensive spiritual formation also started to collapse. 40,000 spirit masters also followed. Numerous spells struck out, wiping out the last remnants of the spell. You can go. 30 minutes later, charge in. Zhong Shou floated in the air. His tone was ice cold and emotionless. Everyone, kill them all! Yes, sir. Hu Zhongyuan laughed out loud and ran to the front of the cavalry formation. He waited quietly while the tens of thousands of spirit masters continued to strike. Within the depths of the valley, cries and screams spread out from time to time. Zhong Shou, I am going to go all out with you. Damn it! I don't want to die. I didn't kill anyone, let me go. Some black streaks of light flew up and tried to charge out of the valley. However, the moment they appeared, they were smashed into pieces by tens of millions of spells. Even if there were some that escaped, the two Big Dipper demons slaying sword formations in the air just needed one sword to kill them. Even the ground was locked down by a large area of petrification technique. It caused all the earth movement techniques to lose their effectiveness. Coincidentally, at the third moment, all the spells stopped at the same time. Then, the 100,000 cavalry were like an iron current. Amidst the rumbling, they swiftly charged into the valley. At the front of the cavalry formation was Tsang Xingdao's 20,000 common people's Xian dragons. Zhong Shou waved his sleeves and a ball of gold and silver light surged out. The Saint Fire Silver Ants were born from the vengeful energy of heaven and earth. However, during this period of time, they hadn't killed anyone. To prevent these beings from rebelling, one couldn't suppress their nature. At this moment, it was time for these silver ants to enjoy themselves. Chu Shui held the blood moon blade and with a flash, she was at the entrance of the valley. He was holding down the fort for Hu Zhongyuan in case there were Saint Realm experts within the demon spirit sect who would counterattack. Zhong Shou was outside and looked on calmly. Those few End Realm intents were even sharper, even to the point that his bones were continuously creaking. Zhong Shou didn't care at all. Instead, he was using their strength to train his body. Did these few people really want to crush Zhong Shou into pieces? That was the best. They hated him to the bone, but there was nothing they could do about it. Junior brother, I know you aren't afraid, but you have to take it easy. A sigh spread out from behind. A white-robed teen walked over from the void. If you provoke them like this, how will those few saint venerables have any face left? Senior brother Mingyu. Zhong Shou turned around and then smiled without any warmth. Did Senior Master Xiuguan or Senior Brother Wei Su ask you to say that? No. Mingyu's heart jumped and he shook his head. Senior Master said that you can do whatever you want. Junior Brother Wei Su also said that it was okay. Only, during the Battle of God Falling Plains, he personally saw the three God Venerables of the Confucian faction retreat. The Confucian faction God Venerables were formed by the three End Realm spiritual senses. This was why they instinctively wouldn't be enemies with the Saint Emperor. This was also the reason why the two demon path sects didn't even try to turn the situation around after the 60,000 purple Qilin flame spear cavalry were wiped out. Zhu Zi alone was unable to suppress the common people's 7 swords. The advantage of having End Realm experts was wiped out. Before Zhu Zi was unable to deal with the resistance of the three God Venerables and before Taisha recovered, the three factions were at a disadvantage. This was why at this moment, when Zhong Shou led his troops to charge into Demon Spirit Sect, the three faction venerables swallowed their anger and didn't interfere at all. However, junior brother, your actions are a little too much. It wasn't just a little too much, it was pretty much making it hard for them to back down. He was slapping Wushang Yuan Demon's face. He wasn't afraid of himself, but he was worried about Zhong Shou's safety. If he really infuriated those few saint venerables, they wouldn't care about the consequences. Then, even with Xiuguan's ability, he might not be able to protect Zhong Shou. Seeing Mingyu's worry, Zhong Shoxin's heart felt warm and his expression became much gentler. However, he sighed inwardly. It was no wonder that Shi Zi had chosen Wei Su, who was the latest to enter the sect, instead of the few senior brothers who were older. Senior brother, you are worried. However, senior brother Mingyu, the righteousness of the world is in my hands. It isn't the Confucian faction. Mingyu's eyes rose up and she didn't understand what he meant. Demon path cultivation techniques often use people as blood sacrifices. Their disciples are often violent and love to kill. Murder cases and misdeeds could be found everywhere. Everyone in the world has hated the demon path for a long time, but because of the chaos in the cloud world, there was nothing they could do. As he said this, Mingyu was deep in thought and understood something. The Confucians and Taoists dared to join hands with the demon path because the Confucians controlled the world. As long as they could achieve their goal, some small flaws would be wiped out in history. Who in the future would know? After the situation was settled, who would dare to criticize them? Even if someone remembered it, they could say that they were slandering the Confucians and Taoists. However, today, the one in charge of the righteousness of the world was Zhong Shou, who was the saint ruler of the world. I am giving the order to wipe out the demons. I am wiping out this tumor for the people of the world. Zhong Shou looked coldly into the sky. If they dare to offend the world, then that is exactly what I want. I will definitely cause the Confucians and Taoists to be unable to recover. The moment he said this, a ball of blood exploded out from Zhong Shou's right hand. It was the intent of those few end-realm experts who increased the pressure from Ling to the extreme. Zhong Shou couldn't take it anymore and a wound appeared on his right hand. Zhong Shou wasn't shocked or angry. Instead, he laughed out loud in an arrogant manner. Apart from that, what else could they do? Kid, sooner or later, I will use your soul and body as a candle to light up this world. Wushang Yuan Demon's cold voice spread out from afar. Zhong Shou was too lazy to bother. A warm spiritual current flashed across his body, causing his injuries to instantly heal. Lin Xuanxuang was using the source life spirit breathing technique to heal his body. At this moment, the killing noises in Demon Spirit Canyon had slowly stopped. Zhong Shou's body flashed and he entered the canyon. He saw Hu Zhongyuan standing in a pool of blood and corpses. He looked into the sky and grinned. Ruler, I have killed them all, not a single one is left. Zhong Shou nodded. He swept the entire canyon with his spiritual sense, and there were no more living beings. Then, he flashed once more. They arrived in front of a weird demon hall that had totally collapsed under the attacks of spells. Everything here was smashed into pieces. Only one of the god statues was still perfectly fine. World-destroying God Venerable. The teachings of the demon sect World-destroying God Venerable were that this world would be destroyed. Only by believing in the world-destroying God Venerable would one be able to be reborn in the new world under the protection of the God Venerable. Zhong Shou took a look and a sword light flashed. Slaying sword intent shot out and a blood-red sword light slashed onto the statue. Chapter 1098. Just as the sword energy was about to strike, a ball of light appeared outside the statue and blocked Zhong Shou's slaying sword light. The two of them clashed, causing the ground below to crack open. Countless spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the ground. The statue didn't move at all and was perfectly fine. A phantom of the world-exterminating hierarch emerged from the statue. Those eyes that looked like they could destroy everything were filled with boundless god aura as they coldly looked down on Zhong Shou. All of a sudden, dark energy surged over. The fresh blood that flowed in the valley seemed to have a life of its own as it swiftly gathered towards the statue. There were also numerous vengeful spirits that wrapped around the air, causing the Yin energy here to increase. Unfortunately, you are just a clone and not the main body. Zhong Shou waved his sleeves and Xiari appeared. With a furious roar, a red flame burned, causing the evil energy to dissipate. The god-refined sword in Zhong Shou's hand seemed to have a strong suction force as it swallowed all the vengeful spirits. The slaying sword light's aura increased once more. With a pring, it finally broke through the god power light and stabbed into the body of the statue. It stabbed into the wood, and one could see fresh red blood flowing out from within the statue. The god venerable image's gaze became more and more strict. The spiritual light dimmed, and it showed signs of weakness. Wushang Yuan demon's voice spread out once more. However, this time it was filled with helplessness. You can speak now. Zhong Shou, what do you want before you are willing to stop? Samuraim's eyes flashed and he broke into a laugh. Saint Venerable should know what I want, so why do you need to ask? It is just a life for a life, a blood for blood. During these 2 months, your demon sect needs to give me an explanation for what you have done. Naturally, there is also that blood saint demon lord. The air was silent for a long time. Zhong Shou scoffed coldly. No matter what, Li Bieshue definitely wouldn't hand over the person who had the highest chance of breaking through to End Realm. But it didn't matter. This time around, no matter what, he was going to make the demon sect suffer. The god-refined sword in his hand was humming happily. The sword light became even sharper, piercing into the statue bit by bit. To the god-refined sword, the god blood that was formed from the faith of tens of millions of people was the best food. At this moment, he was devouring without restraint. It caused the purple-gold sword body to give off a dark red glow. Although this sword was a human Tao Saint sword, it was also an evil sword. Soul-devouring and soul-refining. Every bit of soul it devoured would make the sword stronger. Coincidentally, at this moment, under the statue, a ball of invisible aura suddenly exploded. Kill! At a distance of less than 300 meters, a speck of divine starlight pierced through the air. It wasn't where Zhong Shou was but at the side. With a flash it arrived. At this moment, another Zhong Shou appeared. The starlight directly pierced into his brow and with a pu, his head was smashed into pieces. However, at this moment, another Zhong Shou appeared at the side. His eyes gave off a blood glow. It was the world-burning blood eyes. Using the illusionary heart mirror and Sky Fox power to transform, be it spiritual sense or sight, one wouldn't be able to sense where his true body was. There would be a slight deviation in their perception of his position. Wushang Yuan Demon would definitely be able to see through it, but this person definitely wouldn't be able to. When this person thought that he had grasped the location of Zhong Shou's true body, he didn't know that he had fallen into a trap. You are the demon spirit Saint Lord? The Yuan soul that had been hiding under the statue from the beginning to the end immediately ran away after missing its attack. It spread into the air and mixed into the 5-element spiritual energy. Using the spiritual energy in heaven and earth, it flew into the distance. However, at this moment, Chu Shui had already attacked. A blood-colored blade light slashed into the void. Just half a borrow word was used and a large portion of the heaven and earth spiritual energy was forcefully borrowed over. As the blade slashed down, the blood-red blade shadow was surrounded by 5-colored spiritual light, and the shadows of 5 divine beasts appeared. It caused an extremely painful cry to ring out in heaven and earth. In the next moment, Mingyu's sword followed closely behind. The blazing sword light spread all about and destroyed everything within 1,000,000 feet of space. Moments later, heaven and earth regained its silence. Zhong Shou wasn't distracted at all. He knew that just now, it was just an incarnation of the demon spirit Saint Lord that was wiped out. The older a demon was, the harder it was to kill him. This split soul was just a hidden trump card that the demon spirit Saint Lord had planned, a test. Since this person knew that the demon spirit sect would be wiped out, then why would he dare to take the risk? The light on the slaying sword became brighter and brighter. The sword spirit was really excited. In the eyes of the god statue, 2 streams of blood flowed out. Zhong Shou didn't show any mercy. The demon sect had few believers, and to maintain the world-destroying god statue, they would sacrifice them every few days. On one side, they maintained its god power. On the other, they wanted to make it happy so that they could borrow the god power. After many years of accumulation, this god statue started to crave for it. Its god body was dyed in human blood, so there was no need for him to show mercy. Hong. The god statue finally dissipated, and the god-refined sword finally broke into the body of the god statue. After swallowing a large portion of the spiritual energy, the god-refined sword spirit felt satisfied. Sword chi exploded, instantly blasting the world extermination deity statue into pieces. Pretty much at the same time, Little Gold and Hanshi charged over and also swallowed the shards of the god statue. Even the blue fire Xian turtle ran out and snatched a few pieces without hesitation. The demon spirit sect was a demon path sect, and the god statue here was one of the most important statues of the world-destroying demon venerable. It was a node that gathered the god power of the billions of believers in the south border. The shards of the god statue were really nourishing items for Hanshi. Just by forcefully merging a few pieces of god power into it, the saint white flame burning on Hanshi's body became a little stronger. Numerous silver threads danced around its body like it was about to form a cocoon once more. Even if it didn't evolve, it would be able to split out a few more Saint Fire Soldier ants. As for Little Gold, who knew what it was going to do with these shards, Zhong Shou's spiritual sense spread out. He noticed that the god power ties connected to the various parts of the south border were on the verge of breaking. The entire south border, the god power belonging to the world-destroying god venerable, was in a chaotic state. Only then did Zhong Shou smile in satisfaction. He sent his spiritual sense into his god-refined sword to communicate with the sword spirit. Need more god upgrade spirit? Zhong Shou thought about it, and after integrating all these words, he even asked, "You are saying that I need to swallow more of these venerable god power wishes to complete the upgrade? It can even raise the sword spirit level?" The god-refined sword instantly buzzed excitedly, showing that it acknowledged Zhong Shou's word. Zhong Shou smiled. This was good news. In the next 20 days, this sword would definitely swallow a lot of god power. As long as it could swallow it. The god-refined sword was a peak celestial artifact. If it went one step further, it would just be a god weapon. With a god weapon in hand, one would have the ability to go up against Saint Realm experts. Unfortunately, he wasn't a true Saint Realm cultivator. Otherwise, with this god weapon, even if he was an End Realm cultivator, as long as it wasn't someone above Long Ying, he would be able to go up against them. Mingyu stood at the side and looked on quietly as the statue fragments were split up by Zhong Shou's few spiritual pets. At this moment, a look of comprehension appeared in his eyes. Break the mountain and destroy the temple? Junior brother, are you prepared to pull down this god-venerable End Realm god-venerable position? Destroying the demon spirit sect statue was breaking one of the foundations of the world-destroying god-venerable in South Border. If he destroyed the demon sect's branches in South Wind Cloud Continent as well as the world-destroying god-venerable statue, pulling down this god-venerable End Realm god-venerable position was a sure thing. Once his aura fell, to recover wouldn't be something that could be done in a short time. It would need a few thousand years of rest and gathering more believers before it could recover. That year when Shi Zi fell, the Taoist faction gods and the 3 god venerables of the Confucian faction had to rest for 8,000 years. Even today, they still hadn't recovered to their peak. Senior brother is wise. Zhong Shou nodded slightly and smiled. Junior brother also has the identity of the sky-burning Lu family crown prince. Although I don't care and am not willing to have anything to do with the Lu family, I can't ignore mother. At this moment, there was nothing that would make the demon sect feel more pained than to pull down this god venerable end realm god venerable. Most of the demon sect experts were cold and cruel. No matter how many of their disciples died, they wouldn't be moved. Only the loss of strength and benefits would make the demon sect feel pained. With just one end realm protecting them, not only would the demon sect be chased within Deqian, but they would also be surrounded. Even the Taoist faction, which was temporarily working together, might be tempted. Although the demon sect was weak in the mid-plains, they occupied many spiritual lands and mines at the border. Mingyu sucked in a cold breath. Her junior brother actually had such plans. No wonder Li Bieshue would be so furious, even willing to put down his face to beg Zhong Shou. However, thinking about it, it made sense. If Zhong Shou left the cloud world, the common people's 7 swords would lose their core. They had to maintain the balance of the cloud world after Zhong Shou left. They could only cause the imbalance between both sides when they had the advantage. Heavily injuring the demon sect and pulling down the end realm god venerable was the only good plan. It was also something that Zhong Shou and Song Shengdao's Kenzo sect could achieve. After slashing the statue, Zhong Shou flashed once more. This time, he appeared at the place where the demon spirit sect kept their book. Most of the books here were drowned and destroyed by the attacks of the 40,000 spirit masters. However, there were a portion of top-secret books that weren't destroyed. Zhong Shou reached out and sucked them all over. A large portion of them were demon path secret books that were useless to him. However, there was also a portion that were normal cultivation methods. They were all above grade 7 and could help his Gantian mountain book hiding hall. After doing all these things, Zhong Shou looked towards the south. Next was the Songhai demon sect, which was just below the demon spirit sect in the south. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qigyan.com to vote for me. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.